Good evening, everyone. The Puyallup City Council meeting for January 28th is called to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here this evening. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Johnson.
Present.
Deputy Mayor King.
Present.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Present.
Councilmember Whitting.
Present.
Councilmember Dorr.
Excused.
Councilmember Adler.
Present.
Mayor Kastner.
Present. Okay, at this time, on every meeting of the City Council, I scan the audience looking for students, young high school, junior high, or grade school students, because we like to acknowledge those. And I don't know how many students I see, but I believe there is a young lady over here. If she would like to rise so we can acknowledge her, that would be a wonderful opportunity. Hi, young lady. What's your name? Pardon me? Dianara. Thank you for being here, Dianara. Any other young students we have? Oh, there we go. Well, there's going to be a future student. Thank you. We do that because, frankly, they're the future of our city, and we ask them to hopefully someday be sitting in our seats up here. So we honor that as best as we can. So with that, we're now going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to consideration of minutes. 2A, approval of the January 7th, 2025 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. Let's move on to presentations and proclamations. Today we are honored to have Andy Anderson, our resident historian, who would like to give us a presentation from American Legion Post 67.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From time to time, you've asked me to come and give you little tidbits of history, and this is the first one of these. And I thought it'd be important to look back to 1852 to point out the strategic importance of this community at that time. We all remember Ray Egan's portrayal of Ezra Meeker coming to town, arriving by water, having taken 3 days to come up by canoe from Tacoma, and finding it untamable when he got here. And he thought so little of it, he left and came back a few years later. But at the same time, there was an important road through the area here. Now, just north of town, north of the bridge, a little bit to the west, there is a four-sided marker. And one side of the marker says that this is where John Carson's ferry was. There's also a bridge from time to time. And that Fort Maloney was here. Fort Maloney was the fort built during the Indian Troubles in 1854 and 55. The folks who were living in the valley vacated. They went by the road that we're going to connect the dots on in a minute. But somebody had to protect the river crossing because this was a significant river crossing for military traffic going from Fort Steilacoom to each of the outlying forts, one of them being Fort Bellingham, came right here, right through the middle of town here. So the other point to connect is this sign, which is at Maplewood School, and it talks about the road that has been known as the Military Road. You see Military Road signs off and on as you go on up the way. Historical Road number 1, Bird's Mill Road, they're all the same road. And this is the way that when folks left town in 1854, They went to Fort Steilacoom and the town of Steilacoom. Now, there is no sign of anything left that goes cross-country, but this road did. And this is 2 copies of the same map. The one on the left is the unadorned map, if you will, the surveyor's map from 1864. And it shows a road coming in and going sort of cross-country, dropping down into the valley about Maplewood School, and then going up to the river crossing. The red boundary on the other map is essentially Puyallup today overlaid over that, which just kind of helps you point out where that is. Now, there is a brochure, and I have sat through a person who did the work on this, and it took longer for her to go through her map than it takes to drive it. But you can follow this foot by foot all the way up through King County on the way to Bellingham. But that's the importance of that for us is that it came right through town, right up to the river, and the Fort Maloney was placed there. We don't know exactly where, but Charlie Ross in the 1920s, when that marker was put there, said it was within 100 yards of that marker. So take your pick. The river's changed a little, but that's the strategic importance of the river. Now, while we're on the subject of the river, this is the 1890 Puyallup map. Right smack in the middle where it folded is Meridian. And if you look very carefully a little bit to the right of center, you will see a dotted line for the Oxbow. And this is the big bend in the river. You remember the way it used to flood back in the 1990s. There's been a lot of work done on the river to try and straighten it out, but it always used to back up and flood the northern part of town. It was so bad in the 1880s that it was on John Carson's property, but J.P. Stewart paid to hire Chinese laborers to dig across the top of the Oxbow and straighten out the river. And so the interesting thing about that Oxbow today is that is Grayland Park. And if you wondered why there's a step down into the park, it's been that way since the beginning. On the back of the building that's there now, you can see a mural of the tourist camp that was there in the 1920s. The interesting thing is that there was a full ball field in the park early on. You remember playing there? Okay. The bypass did not go through. And it wasn't until they made Meridian one way, they had to have a way north out of town, that they cut through the park, dividing it in half.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. We'll now come to order for the Puyallup City Council. Again, this is the meeting for January 28th, and we are now resuming that meeting due to technical problems. We had to stall it. So with that, we're now at the portion where we have citizen comments. Again, just to maybe reiterate the fact that we are going to have a public hearing within this meeting at which you will be able to speak for 2 minutes addressing the Cornforth, the Palindrome development, or the comprehensive plan. This is for general citizens' comments. You can speak at it and address those other issues. Certainly, I will not, curtail that in any way. So if you want to speak at both, you can do that too. So with that, I would like to first ask Kathy Turner to come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Kathy Turner, District 1, former Planning Commissioner for 8 years, Council member for 18 years, and 6 of those as Mayor. I'm familiar with the Growth Management Act and the comp plan review process. I remember the many hours we spent on the updates, and I thank you and the Planning Commission for your very hard work. Around 2000, many of us from Pierce County, Puyallup, and other cities traveled to Mount Weather for training regarding the dangers we face living near Mount Rainier. We spent many days viewing newscasts pending earthquakes and interruption. We planned for evacuations, safe areas to gather, encouraging people to leave early and to get to higher grounds and shelters. I was responsible for TV announcements. After telling people for days that it was going to happen, it did. It was overwhelming and emotional to see the stimulation of the mountain blowing and the mud flow heading to our city. At that time, we were advised that people had 15 to 20 minutes to get out of the valley. My job became to inform you all to leave. 512 was stopped. Meridian was blocked. No cars could get up the hill on 9th. And my announcement was, you must leave your belongings and walk to the cemetery. 512, Meridian, nor 9th, which are still our evacuation routes today, have not changed. The population was about 25,000, and today it's over 45,000. I know a lot of work's been put into this update, but why the exception in Section 3, page 13, has not been used as a planning tool? The provisions of this section do not apply, I quote, to lots designated within the critical area designation. You've excluded the exemptions for steep lots, hillsides, for lots without sewers, for lots that could be flooded, for areas even with homeowners associations, but you have avoided the most critical area in our city, our county, one that we train for, that school kids walk the evacuation path, that is blared into our community the first of each month, that is on the cover of Popular Mechanics last month, telling us our city's in danger. You saw the disaster of the fires in California, and that could be us with a lahar. My council was excited when Growth Management provided us 2 regional growth areas, but we always discussed the major growth population would be on the hill, and we of course would still grow in the valley, but not to the extremes the current document is suggesting. It is disappointing realizing that staff, the consultant, your attorneys, and management did not discuss this exemption and the possibilities it offers.
I apologize, but the 3 minutes are up.
Go back to the drawing board, please. Include the lahar areas in your exemption with limited growth for safety and the well-being of our constituents.
Thank you for those comments. Billy Hetherington. Billy, I noticed that you signed up for 5A. You can speak now or when we have the public hearing in a bit, or at both, your choice.
I'll do it right now, Mayor. Thank you. Evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Billy Hetherington, proud member of Labor's Local 242 and District 1 resident here in Puyallup. I stand before you tonight to speak to 5A on the agenda, the development agreement between the City of Puyallup and Palindrome. You'll see council chambers here are full of a lot of construction folks tonight, and we're here. A lot of us were here early, looking at the beautiful project that is planned for the city. And I don't think any one of us wouldn't want to work on a project of that size, in a city like this. But looking at the development agreement between the City of Puyallup and Palindrome, and to, for lack of a better term, give the property away without any type of community benefit to people like myself or the 300 plus members that I represent at my local that have a Puyallup address is concerning. And it's concerning to everybody that sits here tonight behind us here, and that's why we have a packed room. Projects like this should have more community input. Look at, like I mentioned, a community benefit agreement that would, offer apprenticeship opportunities to like Mayor Castema, the future of the future generation here in Puyallup, the kids that are recognized before every single meeting. We have an ACES program up at Rogers High School that we recognize as a state registered pre-apprenticeship construction training program to provide those opportunities, provide opportunities to the workers on that project to earn a living wage, local hire, just these type of things that can be included in a community benefits agreement with Palindrome. Another opportunity that the city can look at, we are a growing city and we have properties that we're looking at repurposing. You know, if we can finally move on past the police station that's downtown here and build something new. This property here, I just hope the city is looking at doing like a TIF, tax incremental financing district. I mean, that's something that we can do, that we can bond, that we can bring infrastructure in that can entice this type of development. We don't need to give prime real estate away to development. There's other mechanisms that the state has put in our toolbox for you all to use as a city to entice development. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Hannah Nordlund, once again, you can wait if you'd like, or speak now, or both.
Hello, I need the full 3 minutes. So my name is Hannah Nordlund. I live in District 1. Of note, my grandfather is former Mayor Ken Martin. I love this city with all of my heart. So that said, I'm a fourth-generation Puyallup citizen, downtown homeowner, resident, and a small business owner. I am pro-development on this project, but there are major caveats with that. First, we need more retail. As a downtown, or as somebody that is looking to make their business downtown, I can't get in anywhere. There is nowhere for me to put my business at a brick and mortar. That's a problem. We also have over 10 establishments that already serve alcohol. If you look on Google Maps, everywhere along Meridian is either a restaurant, a pub, or a bar. Why do we need another? So nobody really asked for that. So again, instead of a food hall, retail, right? So other people like me, small business owners, can get their foot in the door and help support the economy of Puyallup. Puyallup used to be also known as a family-friendly city. We have lost a lot of our family-friendly activities. And for me, I'm an event planner. I throw murder mystery parties, very family-friendly. And again, we need to be able to facilitate more family-friendly activities around the town. And with another brew pub going in, that puts more drunk drivers on our roads, right? That reinforces the fact that Puyallup is no longer family-friendly, and I'm not okay with that, nor are probably the majority of the residents, right? So again, we don't need another brew pub. Also, 5 stories is way too tall. Point blank, too tall. I'm gonna be looking at that 5th story from my front yard, and I say no. Cap it at 3. There's no need for this monstrosity to tower over Meeker Mansion, the heart of our city, right? City Hall, also 5 stories. It should be 5 stories. It should be the focal point, aside from our historic designation.
30 seconds.
My biggest complaint is the design. It doesn't fit. Puyallup is a historic town, and anything that goes into this spot as a development needs to reflect that, right? So there should not be massive amounts of glass, no metal, things that are very brutalist, modern, no place here in Puyallup. Another biggest thing is the taxes. They should not be receiving 12 years tax-free.
Thank you. Your time is up. Appreciate your comments. Let's move on to Jesse Cervantes.
We're going to switch it up a little bit. I'm Matt Davies. Good evening. My name is Matt Davies. I'm from District 25. I'm here on behalf of the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters. I've been a proud union carpenter for 25 years and resident of Puyallup for 48 years. The city is my home, and I deeply care about the decisions being made here, decisions that affect workers, taxpayers, and our community as a whole. Tonight, I'm compelled to address the city's decision to transfer public property to palindrome communities for just $1. A developer whose track record raises significant concerns. In Oregon, workers on palindromes projects reported waiting weeks for their hard-earned wages due to poor oversight of subcontractors. This failure to ensure timely payments jeopardizes workers' livelihoods and underscores a troubling lack of accountability. Puyallup has an obligation to protect both its taxpayers and its workers. Washington State has already recognized the importance of such protections with legislation like House Bill 1206, which ensures fair treatment of workers and prioritizes transparency in public projects. Yet here we're handing over public land without any guarantees that similar issues won't arise. This is a missed opportunity to require provisions that align with HB 1206, such as enforceable labor standards, apprentice utilization goals, and protections for taxpayers' investments. Public projects should reflect public values. By tying this land deal to requirements that safeguard workers, such as ensuring the use of state-registered apprenticeship and enforcing timely wage payments, Puyallup can set a standard for responsible development. I urge you to prioritize accountability and fairness in this project. Without these measures, the city risks undermining both its workers and its taxpayers. As someone who has spent nearly 5 decades in this city and a quarter of a century as a proud union carpenter, I want to see Puyallup stand for fairness, equity, responsibility. For that reason, I call on the council to pull this item from tonight's agenda. This project is not ready to move forward until proper safeguards are in place to protect workers, taxpayers, and our community.
30 seconds.
Let's take the time to get this right for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Matt, you went instead of Jesse Cervantes.
Yes, sir.
Would Jesse like to speak now?
I think he's going to go third or fourth. We got a second right here, Matt Kervink, I believe.
Okay,
We're going to hit you with 2 Matts right off the gate.
that's fine. Matt, I can't, your last name, I can't make that out.
It's Kervink.
Curving?
Kervink.
Curvink. Please proceed, Matthew.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Matt Kervink, and I represent the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters. Tonight, I must raise serious concerns about Palindrome Communities, a developer with a history of troubling practices. In Oregon, Palindrome allowed subcontractors to delay worker wages for weeks, shifting the blame instead of taking responsibility for the well-being of the people who built their projects. This is not the type of developer that Puyallup should entrust with public land, let alone for just $1. Washington State has already established the importance of protecting workers and taxpayer dollars. Puyallup now has an opportunity to strengthen this project by incorporating similar protections, requiring developers to use state-registered apprentices, setting clear labor standards, and ensuring robust oversight to prevent wage theft and exploitation. Without these measures, the city risks repeating the mistakes seen on Palindrome's past projects, where workers pay the price for the developer's negligence. This land isn't just a giveaway. This land isn't just a giveaway, it's a responsibility. Taxpayers deserve a project that ensures fair treatment of workers and meaningful community benefits. Without enforceable labor standards and strong oversight, this project is not ready to move forward. I urge the council to pull this item from tonight's agenda and take the time to incorporate the protections that workers and taxpayers deserve. Puyallup has a chance to get this right. Let's not waste it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is it Jesse? Okay. Okay, hold on. I keep moving people forward. Your name?
It's Mariana Hike. I'm out of District 2, out of the 25 LD. So, good evening, members of the council. My name is Mariana Hike, political coordinator with the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters, speaking on Agenda 5A. I've been a proud resident of Puyallup for over 20 years. Tonight, I come to you with deep concern about the exploitation of workers by developers like Palindrome and the decisions being made to support such projects. Recently, our team spoke with a representative of the developer who stated that the project would be open to bid for all contractors. However, in the same conversation, they disclosed that Palindrome had already identified a general contractor. This contradictory information raises serious concerns about transparency and the fairness in the bidding process. Furthermore, an article published in DJC Oregon highlighted troubling practices on Palindrome's other projects. It reported that workers on a 47-unit apartment building under construction in Southeast Portland complained they were not paid in a timely manner. These delays in payment reflect a pattern of disregard for the well-being of the workers who are essential to these projects. It is worth noting that Palindrome is an out-of-state developer. Are you telling me there aren't qualified local developers we can reach out to for this project? Puyallup has talented and capable developers who understand the needs of our community and could ensure that the benefits of such projects stay local. Why are we prioritizing an out-of-state company with a questionable track record over investing in our own? What's even more troubling is what lies between the so-called gift of 1.5 acres of public land to Palindrome for just $1. The city is not only giving away valuable property, but also using multifamily tax exemptions, our own tax dollars, to subsidize this project. This means that taxpayers are footing the bill for a development that will more than likely provide little to no opportunity for our community to build or benefit in meaningful ways. We deserve better. We want to see labor standards. We want to see apprenticeship utilization. We want to see local community members have access to the opportunities this project could provide. This is about building something that benefits us all, not just developers' bottom line. We work closely with programs like Rogers High School and the Pierce County Skill Center. I am a proud advisory committee on both and the Puyallup School District. We help people transition from high school into careers where they can earn livable wages, access benefits, and provide for their families. What message are we sending to these young people? What are we sending the message to these young people when we can't even have opportunities for them to build in their own community? I am deeply concerned not only for the current residents of Puyallup, but for the children in the city and those seeking to work in the great community we all call home. What kind of example are we setting if we allow exploitation and misuse of public resources to go unchecked? This is not just a project on paper. It's about the lives of workers, the safety of our community, and the values we want to uphold in
30
Puyallup.
seconds.
We cannot stand by while projects like this put profits over people and undermine everything we are working to build. I implore this council to take a stand. Say no to exploitation. Say no to developers who don't share our values. Say no to gifting away our city's resources to projects that fail to deliver for the people of Puyallup. I ask that you two pull this off from the agenda and, talk about this at a later date and time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Jesse Cervantes.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. You better be excellent.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Jesse Cervantes, representing the Western States Regional Council of Carpenters. We have 18,000 members in this state, a lot of which reside at this city. And tonight I'm here to demand accountability from this council regarding its decision to sell public property to Palindrome Communities for just $1. This developer has a documented history of shady practices and outright negligence. And the workers and taxpayers of Puyallup deserve better. Let's talk about the facts. On the recent project in Southeast Portland, workers waited 6 to 7 weeks for their paychecks. Palindrome blamed the subcontractor, but the responsibility falls squarely on their shoulders for failing to vet and oversee the contractors they hire. This isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. Despite all this, Prosper Portland still approved a $1.7 million land sale to Palindrome without ensuring labor protections. And now Puyallup is about to make the same mistake. Why would this council entrust public resources to a company with such a blatant disregard for workers' lives, safety, and livelihoods? Washington State already set the standard with HB 1206, ensuring fair treatment of workers and transparency in public projects. Puyallup should demand no less. This project must include enforceable labor standards, apprentice utilization, wage transparency, and strict contractor vetting. Anything less is a betrayal of the community trusted values. Palindrome has proven time and time again that they cannot be trusted to do the right thing. Not with workers, not with taxpayers, and not with public resources. I demand this council table this agreement until these safeguards are in place. The people of Puyallup deserve a city that prioritizes safety, fairness, and accountability, not corporate negligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate those comments. Now let's move on to Paul Romich. And Paul, is he present? Paul, you can speak now, or you can speak at the public hearing, which is on the agenda next. If people would like to leave, go ahead. Paul, could you please just restrain your comments for a moment? Thank you all for being here. Paul, you can proceed, please.
Yep. Thank you. Paul Romich, District 1. I'm going to save my comments for the public hearings on that stuff, but just kind of talk more broadly about national stuff and how it impacts our city here. So nationally, there's been a bit of a panic regarding funding sources, right? As a city, we're heavily reliant on grants for a lot of our projects, and as well as our state is as well especially for transportation projects. So with the funding pause and similar policies that have been implemented, right? We have to look at our past and what made Puyallup so strong enough to become a city, at the time, more of a American wilderness, right? And that really came down to community, right? Community building. We were able to use our land wisely, and really grow together that way, right? And so when you look at historic downtown Puyallup, right, why is that historic and thriving and still there? It's because it works. So why have we made it impossible to develop that elsewhere throughout the city? Is a great question. But we need, as things become more unknown and less certain with our funding, right? When we think about the future prosperity of our city, we need to go back to what works and really start unlocking the potential of what the city can be, right? So whether it's here in the valley or up on the hill, it should probably be both. But it's just when we're stuck we're trying to freeze the city in the past. It's not going to work. The river always winds, right? So same story with people. We're always growing. So we have to accommodate for that. And I think I'll concede the rest of my time for the public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Is it Vicki Bovin? Would you like to wait? That's on the agenda item right after this. I'll call you then. Okay, Mr. John Hopkins.
John Hopkins, District 1. I'll reserve my comments about the Cornforth lot when you open that up for public hearing. But right now we have comp plan amendments coming up, and there'll be zoning changes happening. I just want to remind you that we are an age-friendly city. Happened about 9 years ago or so. The first in the state, which I'm very proud of. Thank you, Linda Henry, and all those on council who ushered it through. And that was just the beginning. We didn't just hang a plaque on the wall. We went to work. We decided to look and see what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. And what it boiled down to, we were very weak in the area of creative housing. How on earth can you age in place if you don't have a good housing inventory? And that's when we set to work to try and figure out what are we actually short of. And this took a while. We worked with a lot of planners and the senior center. A lot of community outreach went into this. And we came to an interesting conclusion. It was the missing middle, as it's called, in other words, small apartment buildings, and ADUs. And as this moved along, we got closer and closer to where comp plan changes were starting to happen. And then a funny thing happened. We basically got kicked out of our jobs because along came the state legislature, and you had House Bill 1337, which addresses ADUs, and you had House Bill 1110, which addresses middle housing. So I would hope that you consider those items. I think it's mandatory that you consider those items by the state legislature. And I hope that you have an attitude that ADUs aren't tiny housing. I've personally had one at my house for a long time, and it's been used by my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, all of them who had ailing health issues. Never used it to house homeless or anything stupid like that. It's not something that is out of character in the neighborhood. It's just something that really works and gives you flexibility. So I'm totally in support of these House bills and hope they get adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Doc Hanson.
I'll wait for you.
Okay. Tom Utterback.
I'll wait for 5B. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Ben Bennis?
It's Ben Key. I'll wait.
Oh, Ben Key. Okay. Hold on. Okay, with that, is there anyone else who did not sign up who would like to speak under the general comments? Oh, former Mayor John Knutson. Welcome.
Hello, people. How you doing?
Pretty well, John.
Does this work all the time, or is it a button?
Please. No. Turn the microphone.
That?
Yep, that'll do it.
Okay. People sick of hearing me, I'd think. I've lived here all my life, City of Puyallup. My daughter's school teacher, my grandkids, my brothers, sisters all graduated, you know. So there are many others around like that that are a lot of affection for this city. A disclaimer, my wife and her family and us own the Clemens Building, which is 3rd Street Antiques, right across from the Cornforth Campbell lot. And my question is, have you got a strong idea of where those 90 cars are going to be parked that are there every day? You know, you can tear it down, build a building. With the building, that size probably come 40, maybe 60 cars if you lift it up and all that. So then you got the 90 that are there. You unplug those, you unplug business owners, employees, customers, you know, and without those things, you then just become a housing community. And even at that, you have to have cars because you're not going to get people to hire taxis every time they want to go to the tavern or to Sumner. So I really would like that to be memorialized as a parking lot so that others can move in and replace the business that are here. And because they will die. The businesses will die. You know, and then if you decide, well, we'll build a high-rise in the likes of the City Hall or something like that, then they again have to find parking. And the other thing is, I don't know, I'd bet that the property under that lot is not going to pass the health standards in that, because they did pump dirt and take it out and move it, but not as much. And you know, everything in the valley, when the trains go by, ground shakes, everything shifts towards the river, above and below. We had an earthquake and the windows in our building all moved 1.5 inches. Everything that fell off, the thousands of things that fell off the shelves, rolled towards railroad tracks.
Mr. Mayor, speakers,
So
3 minutes.
when you get in the middle of that project, excuse me, John, I have
2 more
to-
hours.
No, 2 more hours. I apologize. I don't mean to be rude at all, John, but you know how strict we have to be on the.
Is that 3 minutes?
You're done. Yes.
3 minutes, okay, because by my watch, it was 4.
Okay. Well, you deserve 4. So thank you for speaking.
I understand, Jim.
That's right.
Thank you.
You bet, John. Always good to hear you. For the record, that was John Knutson, former mayor. I don't think he stated his name, again, for the record. Does anyone else wish to come forward and speak who has not signed up? You realize you can speak now under public comments and then also at the subsequent public hearing. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, council members, if you ask any realtor the 3 most important things to consider when seeking a home, they are likely to say location, location, and location. What this means is that our home is not just a house. It's our neighborhood, our environment, that hopefully offers, per our zoning code, to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare by ensuring adequate access to light, air, privacy, and open space, minimizing traffic congestion and utility overload. End of quote. A large part of this protection has been overwritten by state density mandates. Another part of this protection is currently under threat from new policies in our draft comprehensive plan that allow for creeping commercialization of our residential neighborhoods. The Downtown Neighborhood Plan, DT 4.2, is a policy change allowing commercial uses in residential areas near downtown beyond home occupations, which are well regulated. DT 4.2 allows for small-scale commercial uses, such as offices, but otherwise places no defined boundaries on area or type of business activity. A second issue is that of neighborhood commercial nodes. Commercial nodes can be beneficial, but to be so requires a study of neighborhood needs, appropriate locations, adequate available land, and diligent planning. In our draft plan, the designation is simply given to any property with a non-conforming use involving no stated studies or planning. I have seen firsthand in other cities where I've lived the gradual decline of residential streets where scattered commercial encroachment caused the transition of owner-occupied residences to rentals and then neglected rentals, the loss of street trees, and a general increase in traffic noise and litter. Currently, the state legislature is considering HB 1175, which is likely to pass, and which would allow small restaurants and groceries in all residential areas. At least this bill is very specific regarding the kinds of businesses permitted and would give cities control over size, parking, and hours. Our proposed commercial nodes have no such definition. So I ask that commercial nodes be dropped from the comprehensive plan unless and until we have a well-informed plan that would serve the neighborhoods rather than only the non-conforming owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Oh. Sir, go ahead and state your name.
Matt Hibbs, District 2. The project proposed by Palindrome Development poses significant challenges to the small businesses that make Puyallup unique. While marketed as a revitalization effort, the project threatens to remove crucial parking spaces and restrict access, making it harder for customers to visit longstanding businesses. Small business owners rely on convenient parking and access to sustain foot traffic. Without it, they face potential revenue losses that could force closures. Parking is a lifeline for downtown businesses, and removing it will make visiting these establishments an inconvenience. Beyond the access issues, the track record of Palindrome Development raises serious concerns. Similar projects such as those in Los Ranchos, New Mexico, face strong local opposition due to unfulfilled promises and negative community impact. Reports highlight how Palindrome's past developments have led to unintended consequences, including increased costs for cities and a lack of tangible benefits for local businesses. Given these concerns, Puyallup's small business community has every reason to be wary of history repeating itself. The downtown charm of Puyallup is built on its small businesses, and forcing them into a difficult operating environment could lead to a hollowed-out district. Rather than prioritizing a project that benefits developers over existing community, the city should focus on initiatives that support business owners and improve infrastructure without compromising accessibility. True revitalization strengthens local commerce and does not weaken it. Puyallup deserves a development approach that respects and enhances the businesses that have served the community for years, instead of pushing forward with a project that creates obstacles for the small businesses. City leaders should work with local stakeholders to ensure that any new development contributes rather than disrupts the local downtown economy. The risks of this project are simply too great to ignore. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Seeing no further comments, I do want to state that our last two meetings, we've had people come forward and ask about Fruitland Elementary and the congestion that has taken place outside on Fruitland, and it's been a very key and very contentious issue for that neighborhood. I do not see anyone here this evening who came addressing that issue. Having said that, if they are watching this on TVW or wherever you would watch this, I want them to know that we have prepared a summary of the actions that the school district and the city is taking, and they are quite extensive, to address the traffic congestion on Fruitland. I say that because if a person would have testified, I would have had someone address that, but since they are not here, I will just have them note that if they inquire to any of the council members or the city manager, the city clerk or attorney, we will provide this information for them. With that, we're now going to move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is where we have a list of items that are non-controversial, and in one vote, we go ahead and we vote on all of them together. Now, at this time, is there any item on the agenda that a council member would like to have removed and discussed later? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Is there such a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, excellent. We are now going to move on to the public hearing. And this is maybe what many people here have been waiting for, of course. And this is where we will dive specifically into the Palindrome project. And then we'll go on to the comprehensive periodic plan update. Two completely separate items, but nevertheless, we have those within the public hearing. You will be able to provide 2-minute comments on each one of these, if you so choose. So with that, I'd like to have our city manager, Steve Kirkley, come forward, and he will introduce the project and introduce the principles involved in that.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor Castema and council members. Steve Kirkley, your city manager. And if you recall, back on your meeting on December 10th of last year, we were before you presenting the proposal that Palindrome Development has for the Cornforth Campbell properties. And at that meeting, after the proposal and council input, we have now, over the course of the last month or so, been working with Palindrome staff and Palindrome and our consultant to put together a development agreement and purchase and sale agreement. And so that's why we were here this evening, to bring that back to you for consideration. So this evening, it is going to be a team effort, and Amit, if you could activate the PowerPoint. So I'm going to start with just kind of an overview of the why this project and why now. Some of this you might have heard back in December, but we can't be sure that everyone was necessarily watching that meeting, so we just wanted to provide an overview again. And then we will have Robert Gibson, who is the president of Palindrome, will come up and talk about the overview of the project and of Palindrome. We'll also discuss some of the labor issues that have been raised this evening. Then Brian Veneman, who is our consultant with foreign placemaking and has done this type of work throughout cities in Western Washington and Oregon. We'll go over the development agreement and the purchase and sale agreement on a very high level. If you certainly have any questions about that, that's been a team effort, and the city attorney is available. Meredith Neal, our Development Permitting Services Director, and myself can also answer questions along those lines. Then Meredith will talk about the parking. As we know, that is an issue that has been raised, and we want to just discuss that head on this evening. And then we'll talk about next steps, which the most immediate next step will be a public hearing. And then after the public hearing, it will be your deliberation. So that's the run of the meeting, so to speak, of the presentation this evening. So why this project? Why now? I think everyone probably knows where the site is, but I'm just going to do it out of an abundance of caution. But we are talking about the Cornforth Campbell properties here with the checked line around it. It's parcels that immediately to the south is Meeker Street, and then immediately to the north is Main, and then the bypass or 3rd to the east, and then to the west is 2nd Street. So that's the property that we're talking about. Back in 2002, the city purchased this. This used to be a car dealership and car maintenance shop. And since 2002, there's been significant environmental cleanup by the former owners, of which the city has been a part of. You know, we talk about the past and the history of this project. Back in 2005, about 3 years after the city purchased this, the city engaged in a very extensive planning effort, which it resulted in a downtown redevelopment plan and a charrette. And as part of that plan, they identified 10 priority projects. It could really be catalyst projects for downtown Puyallup. This was one of them. That was, close to 20 years ago. Obviously, over the past 20 years, there's been a lot of work on the environmental component of it and different factors in the economy, et cetera. In 2019, the council adopted the Downtown Economic Development Plan, which really then reemphasized the importance of this as a catalyst site for economic redevelopment in downtown. So there certainly is a history behind this site and the importance of it. Also, one of the items that you're going to discuss after this item is the comprehensive plan. As you all know, pretty significant density requirements that are on the city over the next 20 years. And this certainly doesn't meet it, but certainly enhances our ability to accommodate that growth, and does it in the regional growth centers, which are downtown, and then certainly other one up on the hill. And lastly, just as a reminder, as we've mentioned a few times, the community satisfaction survey that we did in the fall, the community, over 400 Puyallup residents responded to that. And one of the areas that they really emphasize is on downtown economic vibrancy. It's a very important component. And so this certainly would fit into that. In terms of other work that has been done more recently, back in 2021, the city staff worked with a consultant just to look at the viability of this site as a market hall, a place where people can come and gather and eat, gather together, and kind of have a central site that is a draw for people. And part of one of the concerns with that study was it's very expensive to do, and it was not something that the city could do on its own. And so as part of the request for proposal that went out a couple years later in 2023, part of that request for proposal was give us a proposal that shows how we can activate this space, use the existing building, repurpose the existing building for a market hall. The city got 3 responses, and one of those responses was from Palindrome Development. They have done this work before in Portland, down in New Mexico, and those projects include similar concepts as the market hall. The other 2 proposals did not. They were simply just residential with some limited commercial. Another important point here that I just want to note is that in 2024, this last summer, we received a no further action from the Department of Ecology for the petroleum, the gas contamination. That's a very significant decision and opinion from the Department of Ecology. There still will need to be monitoring, but in terms of the remediation for the gas component of it, we did receive a no further action. It's part of the development agreement, and Brian will briefly touch on that. There are still some responsibilities that Palindrome and the former owner still will be responsible for. Lastly, just want to continue to discuss and remind council, and I don't need to remind you, you know of our Meeker Festival Street project. And as we have developed that, one of the significant components of that is really activating it. You can build a festival street, that's great, and we bring festivals, events, vibrancy, but you need to activate it. And this project certainly will be a nice nexus to activate the festival street. And as you will hear from Brian later, there's some components in the project that Palindrome will build and then allow us to use that are connected to the festival street. So with that, I'm going to introduce Robert Gibson, who was at the meeting on December 10th. So you've seen Robert before, and he is going to do a brief overview of the project and of Palindrome. Robert?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. As Steve introduced me, I'm Robert Gibson, president of Palindrome Development. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. Really excited to be here tonight. This is, I've been working with the city over the last 2 years on this concept, and this is, if approved tonight, this is just the start of our journey in becoming, a proud partner with the city and the community of Puyallup. So we're really happy to be part of this project. Give you a brief overview of who Palindrome is. We're unique in that we're a private company. We're very small. We're not faceless. It's the owners of the company, including myself, are involved in every project. We really pride ourselves on becoming members of the community and being very closely involved in every project that we take on. So this is a 15-year or longer commitment that our company's making to work on this project. So we don't take it lightly, and we value everyone's input and that we've received tonight and will continue to receive as we move forward. One of the things that's also unique about Palindrome is that we do hospitality, which manages the food halls. So we do hands-on management of commercial and hospitality concepts. We've done those in other similar projects. We also have a professional property management company. So we are very hands-on property management. We're not relying on a third party to tell us what's happening with the properties that we own and manage. So we're very involved in the day-to-day management of the building and will continue to be for the duration. And then finally, we have our own construction company. And I'll clarify what our construction company is, because there's a lot of different types of construction companies. We're a construction management company, meaning that we don't have employees that build things. We hire out all of the work that gets done on a project. So we don't have our own framers and employees that actually build projects. We hire local subcontractors. And for this project, we would have an open bid process, and we would encourage through publications and bid services to encourage local subcontractors to participate in the opportunity to build this project. I will address just a couple of comments that were brought up today, because they only tell one side of the story, and there was comments about community benefit arrangements. And the project that was referred to in the city of Portland, although it wasn't a public project, it was private. It was in an urban renewal district, the Lentz Urban Renewal District, and we were encouraged by the city of Portland to contract with women-owned, minority-owned, and emerging small business subcontractors, along with, which is great because it gives people opportunities that might not have otherwise had a chance to work on a big project. But along with that, for emerging small businesses, those are often very small contractors that are starting to do bigger projects that maybe they haven't had the experience to work on before, and we're helping them along the way. In the case of the project in Portland, that business owner went out of business and became insolvent. So rather than sue that subcontractor and replace them, we stuck with them, and we voluntarily paid their employees. It was reported that they were paid late, but that's just because it took us time to go around the subcontractor and directly pay those employees, making sure they were paid in full. So that's also something that's unique about us, because we're the owner and the contractor. We didn't have to ask permission from our owner to do that. We just did it because it was the right thing to do. So we take, labor very seriously, and we want to ensure that the people that work on our projects, especially because they're usually from the local community, that they're taken care of, and we're proud to have them be part of our projects. I'll briefly talk about the project because I know we're going to have a lot of questions, and other members of the team tonight will be giving an overview. But the project includes three main components. It's the main central component is an adaptive reuse of the existing building that's on the site. It's a partial reuse of the building, which will be a food hall, or a market hall. Actually, it will serve beer, but it'll also have small food pods that will be fully built out. So local restaurateurs will be able to move into a space with everything built out without any capital improvements. They just bring their menu and their knives and a good idea, and we support them in that. It also will include commercial space for small business owners. We really believe in micro retail for people that don't want to sign 10-year leases with big capital improvements. We will include commercial space. Additionally, there will be 7 townhomes on the plaza that's along 2nd Avenue. Those 7 townhomes will be for sale, of which 2 of those have an affordable housing covenant. The larger project is a 115-unit rental community with a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms. It addresses the missing middle, as we have 20% of the units designated for households earning 80% or less of median income. That's really important to us, that we build apartments that represent the community. It can't all be luxury. It can't all be low income. It needs to be a mix of different housing types and housing incomes which represent the community of Puyallup. And so we hope to replicate this and provide opportunities for people to live downtown, which will further support local businesses, as it'll attract employees and that won't have long commutes. That'll be my dream would be that they would live there and walk over to their job and come home and walk their dog at lunch. And that's the idea, that we want to create an opportunity for that type of housing arrangement. And we also really believe in sustainability. You can see on the roof that we have solar panels. So we'll provide rooftop solar that'll provide energy for the residents in the building, which will really help on energy costs. As we all know, our utility bills keep on going up. And that's the end of my brief presentation. I obviously have a lot of questions, so I'll be available for those. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager Steve Kirkley, do you have more?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I won't spend a lot of time on this because we did go over this at December 10th meeting, so I do want to get on to Brian so he can start to dive into the details and then get to the public hearing. But just to highlight a few things here, the over 130 plus individuals will be living there. Our initial estimates is that would bring in about $1.3 million per year into Puyallup businesses and spending. That's a very conservative estimate. And also Palindrome is estimating about 175 construction jobs that would go into the construction of the 3 phases, and then there would be ongoing jobs both to manage the apartment building and then also for the food hall. And then, of course, the additional tax revenue that would go to support our general services, police, library, parks, etc. So now I want to turn it to Brian Veneman, who is going to go through and just, again, provide a high-level overview of the development agreement and the purchase and sale agreement, and then we'll wrap it up with Meredith, who will talk about parking.
Excuse me. Question I have. On the public value, in what section will that be? Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for having me here tonight and for talking about this project. I'm Brian Veneman. I'm with Forum Placemaking, and I've been working with some of you and the city since 2022 on this project. And I'm both excited to be here with you tonight and recognize that you have heard a lot of differing opinions about this project, and look forward to answering any questions you have about it. My share of the presentation here tonight is to talk about two agreements, the development agreement and the purchase and sale agreement. We're providing those full documents in your packets. It's really, from my point of view, the development agreement is really the key agreement that it contains the roles and responsibilities of primarily of Palindrome, but also of the city, and I'll talk about some of the city responsibilities. But, big picture, it says what Palindrome is going to do and build and when they're going to do it. The development agreement format is something that I've personally worked on with numerous cities, as Steve mentioned, in Washington and Oregon. As an example, the Woodinville Schoolhouse, but many others, that it's a binding agreement where the city has recourse if Palindrome fails to carry out what's promised in the agreement. The purchase and sale agreement is more of a pro forma agreement that's documenting the transfer of the property. So I'm going to talk about a few aspects of this agreement, what the project is, the public benefits, milestones, in other words, the timeline, the city's roles, and some of the departures, which actually are pretty minimal, in my opinion, from the zoning code. So project components, let me see if the cursor works here. It does. So both of the previous speakers talked about the project components. They're a little more clearly defined here. A is the Market Hall, which is the reused building, and also the public plaza, which is here on the right-of-way, current right-of-way of 2nd Street. The mixed-use building, and the Market Hall is the first element of this project that will be built. We anticipate groundbreaking, and I'll go through this in more detail in 2026, if all goes well. And then item B is the mixed-use building, component B, which is obviously larger, and then would be built second. And then the townhomes, 7 possibly more townhomes over here, component C. These project components are enumerated, explained, required in the development agreement in a couple different parts. Section 4 is what defines what the project is, and then towards the end, I believe it's on page 80 of your packet, is where the public benefits are described, and that hits these items again. Others have mentioned, so again, the Market Hall includes 6 or more micro restaurants, a brewery, tap house, a public plaza. The mixed-use building has approximately 115 units. At least 20% will be affordable at 80% median income. The remaining 80% approximately will be market rate, so could be more affordable units, but not less than 20%. There will be 20 public parking spaces, which I'll talk about in a little more detail on the site. There will be ground floor retail, public restrooms that will be available to the city to lock or unlock, particularly during special events, festivals that are on Meeker. Equipment storage that is serving events on the festival street. And overall, there's about just under 1 parking stall for each unit. So there's 122 units on the project. There's 120 parking spaces. The townhomes, the DA or development agreement calls for 7 or more townhomes. So if another 1 or 2 can be fit in, Palindrome will be looking for the opportunity to do that. 2 of the townhomes will be sold as affordable at 80% AMI or lower. And they will have parking associated with the units just west of the townhomes. There's the site plan. I enjoyed talking to a few people at the public open house tonight, and a couple things that I just call it that I think we didn't show as public benefits, but on the north side they look like townhomes. These are live-work units. I believe there's 9 of them. And that's a really nice feature, in my opinion, because they're 3-story units with kind of workspace down below, so they'll further activate Main Street. And of course, you've got Meeker, the Festival Street here. This is an exhibit to the development agreement and highlights the public benefits. Another thing I'd say is that we do say on the DA, subject to change. One of the reasons it says subject to change there is because the developer in 2025 will be going through the design review process. So some elements of this site plan could change. That said, all the numbers I'm citing are required in the development agreement. So they have to provide, a certain number of townhomes, a certain number of units, a certain number of affordable units, et cetera. But here you can see the public plaza, the market hall and tap room. A couple other things that we haven't located on the plan are the public restrooms, which we believe likely will be here and will be available to the public at your discretion to determine when. But our assumption now is for events on Meeker. The DA calls for 20 parking spaces to be available to the general public in the center of the site. Those would be available Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. After that time, and Meredith will talk more, but other public parking becomes more available throughout downtown, including the Hill lot to the south. There'll also be, as mentioned, a storage space for those putting on events on Meeker and elsewhere in downtown. Here's the timeline, which is kind of significantly more detailed but less graphical in the development agreement itself, almost at the very end of the development agreement. And this shows you'll see on many of these dates, you'll see a date on top and a date on the bottom. The DA has a target dates in many cases, and then a outside date, meaning the last date by which something must occur. So the first date there is the target date. The second date is the last date, the outside date. So we anticipate in 2025, there's lots to do by Palindrome and by the city should this DA be approved and proceed. Those actions include design review, permitting. There's some additional regulatory actions that need to be completed with the Department of Ecology, even though, as the city manager mentioned, there is no further action on the site. There's street vacation process, et cetera. So there's lots to do in 2025. Groundbreaking takes place on the Market Hall in mid-2026 is the target. And I won't go through all these dates, but essentially there's a start date for each of the components in 2026, 2027, and 2028. And the Meeker Festival Street is expected to be built out starting in 2026 and going through 2027. So there are city roles. One is to design and build Meeker Festival Street as the city has planned. And then another one is to initiate the Second Street vacation process. So I do want to just call attention to that. This right-of-way currently is very low volume, carries low volumes of traffic, and the proposal for Second is that much of it becomes a public plaza that will be covered by an easement that requires public access to this plaza. But this will then, the city would vacate this Second Street right-of-way, and the DA calls for that to begin prior to the property closing, which is expected to occur in February 2026. So that is the initiation of the Second Street vacation process. And then there will be additional agreements that will get into greater specifics on a number of things I've talked about, and they're detailed in some specificity in the DA, including an easement for the public plaza, a license agreement for the public parking, public restrooms, and the townhome affordability covenant. There's some details there that need to be ironed out because to cover resales that will remain affordable over time. So there are some departures from the city's code. Those include the park impact fees. So the Palindrome will be constructing and maintaining the public plaza in perpetuity. And so the DA calls for Palindrome, in lieu of paying the park impact fees, to pay for the improvements of the public plaza. The parking lot, the Palindrome is asking for flexibility on landscaping in the parking area and certain design flexibility of the parking area. In part, that's because there's a lot going on the site. And so, for example, some of the parking spaces, they're asking for flexibility on the size of the parking spaces versus the code. But they have indicated, for example, on landscaping, that they may be able to build more landscaping around the perimeter of the project and not in the parking area. Lastly, the city does have remedies. In other words, should this agreement not work out, and I certainly, my hope would be that it would work out well. But the city does have remedies in the event that Palindrome does not perform. So before closing, which is where the property would change hands, estimated at February 2026, the city could terminate the development agreement if Palindrome is not meeting its obligations. After the start of construction, which is estimated at summer 2026, the city could rescind the sale of the property. And then after construction begins, the city can repurchase the property. There's a formula for that. I can go through it, but our intent there was that the city would, repurchase it at essentially the value that it's selling the property to the developer at. Meredith is going to talk about the parking plan, as that is obviously a concern to many who have spoken this evening, and I'd be happy to talk about anything else.
Thank you, Brian. If at any time you have any questions, council members, please just let me know, and I will go ahead and give you the opportunity to ask those questions. Meredith, please.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Meredith Neal, the Director of Development and Permitting Services for the city. In 2019, the city completed a downtown economic development plan, and one of the high priority strategies identified was to conduct a parking analysis of public downtown parking, both on-street and off-street, and explore ways to balance parking needs with the cost of on-site parking for a new development. In 2020, the city issued an RFP for a downtown parking study, which was completed in late 2021. In 2024, the city completed an update of that parking study, which collected new data collection for the parking inventory on both weekdays and weekends. Both studies found that a parking spot is available within a 1 to 2 block walk from most locations at most times in downtown. Given that our historic downtown blocks are compact in size, this walking distance is often comparable to, or even shorter than, the walk from a parking space to the entrance of a big box retail store. The study identified 6 selected strategies with a phased approach for implementation. A few of them are identified here. The first is wayfinding improvements. That is currently underway, and that's really the goal of adding additional public parking signage to guide visitors to help, and residents, to help them find parking in the downtown area. We have a couple of larger lots, but we also have a number of smaller lots downtown, along with quite a bit of on-street parking. It will also help with pedestrian level signage that'll help people, once they're parked, to figure out their destinations and how to get there. Additionally, we have updating to our permit parking program. The study found that business parking passes would benefit from some updates. So the city clerk's office has taken the lead on those and has made a number of updates to that program. Lengthening time limits. So the study also found that within a block or two of the main core, the parking spots were readily available, with about a quarter of the spots, or 1 in 4 parking spots, being used, so just outside of the main core area. So the study suggested evaluating the effectiveness of parking restrictions and looking at extending the time limits in various areas. So that is something that happened last year in 2024. And so as you see, we now have 3-hour parking in the majority of downtown. Before, we had a mix of 1, 2, and 3-hour parking. The final one is shared parking arrangements. When you look at an aerial of the downtown, you notice that there are a lot of parking areas that are privately owned and that might be used just during the weekdays and not on evenings and weekends. So the city is going to be exploring some shared parking agreements for some of those business parking lots that are underutilized on evening and weekends. So here are some parking occupancy findings from the 2024 update that was done. The study found that even at the peak time, which is noon on weekdays, there was a fairly low usage in the Cornforth Campbell main lot area, about 20 to 30% utilized. So you can see that it's in the blue area that's highlighted on the map that is 0 to 50. So here, let me show that with the pointer here. And then adjacent to that are the Cornforth Campbell covered lot, which is this orange one right here that is directly adjacent to Bumpy's, and the Hill lot, which is this orange lot here. So there was much higher usage in those two areas. Those both currently are business permit lots, and so they are reserved for business parking. Those were more at the 80 to 90% level. They also found that on weekends, there was fairly low usage, very low usage in most of those lots, except on nice summer weekends when the farmers market was in full swing. So Saturdays, when the weather's nice, downtown is busier, you do see some usage in this area. For the most part, it stays closer to the park area, though. So the downtown has over 2,000 public parking spaces in the main downtown core. These include just over 300 on-street parking spaces and approximately 675 spaces that are in city-owned parking lots. There are also a little over 1,000 spaces in the Sound Transit parking lots and in Sound Transit garage. As you can see, there's a list here of spaces that would be available and are currently available within 1 to 3 blocks of this site. So as Brian mentioned, on the Cornforth Campbell site itself, as part of the development agreement, there would be 20 spaces available on weekdays for public parking. The Hill lot, which is the lot that's directly across the street from it, we're going to continue with business parking passes on weekdays, but on evenings and weekends it will become public parking. So that would be for visitors and of businesses downtown. Along with that, we have City Hall. The City Hall lots are all day, every day open to the public, and we have quite a few spaces there. We also have 2 relatively new lots that we've added that are over on West Main, close to the Sound Transit parking area, and those are available all day, every day for public usage. We've been seeing a lot of businesses who work over on that side of Meridian parking there more, so those have been quite successful. Additionally, there's the Sound Transit lot and the lot across from the post office, which is one of the most popular parking lots downtown. We also have some future plans. Those include looking at 2nd Street, so from Pioneer and all the way along this sort of very long block behind City Hall, looking at creating angled parking. When we did the initial parking study, we surveyed residents. We got 534 responses. And one of the things that we heard loud and clear is that people don't really like parallel parking, and that they would much prefer parking in a parking lot or an angled parking. And so that's part of that attempt to maybe create a more desirable type of parking. We also heard from a lot of seniors that they don't feel comfortable getting out of their cars into traffic when they're parking in parallel spots. And so it's more comfortable to park in an angled spot. So we are going to be exploring that as part of our future plan. And we are also looking at those shared parking agreements, as I mentioned. So trying to pick up some of those spaces. And now I will kick it back over to Steve.
So thank you, Mayor and Council. That is the extent of our presentation. In terms of the next steps this evening, obviously it's to hold a public hearing, council deliberation, and if you so choose, then a discussion and approval of the development agreement and person sale agreement. So Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Steve Kirkley. Are there any questions of any of the presenters by council members? If not, we'll go into a public hearing. At this time, I will certainly give preference to people who have filled out a form, and then we will go from there and allow everyone to speak on this particular issue. Having said that, Vicki Bovin, oh, excuse me, one moment, Vicki. Councilmember Whitting, would you like to ask a question?
I just had one question for Mr. Gibson.
Mr. Gibson, please go ahead.
In your the rental units in your project, what's the size of those units? I'm sure there's some variation, but just in general, what's kind of the average in the span?
Yeah, thank you. It's a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. A 1 bedroom unit would be a 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and then a 2 bedroom, 2 bath unit. Those 1 bedrooms are probably on average about 675 square feet. And then the average on a 2 bedroom is around 875 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitting. Vicky Bovin, please. Thank you for your patience.
My name is Vicky Bolden, and I've been a Puyallup resident since 1998. As a business and building owner in downtown Puyallup since 2001, my future concern is adequate parking for our businesses because the proposed development as well as the Meeker Festival Street seems to be diminishing our already struggling parking situation. My request is quite simple, and that is for the City Council to follow the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The taxpayers have taken care of City Hall's parking needs and that of its customers. City Hall has covered parking in the lower level of its building and public parking for its customers in the parking lot attached to the building. This takes care of its customers that have business at City Hall as well as the market vendors that rent from the city. In addition, the city puts up A-frame reserved parking signs on the sidewalks by the pavilion when the city rents the pavilion for events. Should downtown businesses be offered the same opportunities?
30 seconds.
Our businesses and buildings provide our sources of income, just as the taxpayers and the city's renters provide income to the city. In summary, I, as a business and building owner, ask the City Council to follow the golden rule. Please do unto others as you have already done for yourselves.
Mr. Mayor, speakers reach 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vicky.
We need, am I done?
You are. Sorry about that. By the way, just a note, I really don't mean to be rude. It's just that I have to, address that the time limits. And also, with 30 seconds left, our clerk, Dan Vessels, will go ahead and note that. So I just want you to know, if you hear that, it's not one of us trying to interrupt you. It's just him trying to be courteous, I guess. With that, let's move on. Doc Hanson, you're the next issue, correct? Comp plan. I'm just going through all the list here. Tom Atterbeck, I assume the same. Ben Benke, is he still here? Yep. And would you like to address the Cornforth palindrome? Yep. Please do.
Thanks for having me. I work and manage a construction company that works as a subcontractor in this marketplace. We do concrete construction. Our employees are signatory to Carpenters and Laborers Union and consider both of those organizations partners in what we do. As a frame of reference, we did concrete construction on this development when it was built, the City Hall, back in 2007, I think-ish. I felt compelled to say we're working on one of Palindrome's through Pacific Cap Construction, their construction arm in Wilsonville, Oregon right now. And we had the opportunity to bid. We're successful. We're under contract, and we've had a great experience. Been treated ethically, been treated fairly, and I just had a good experience. And I just wanted to share that and felt compelled to do that. That's all I got.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. Okay. Next is Paul Romich, if you so choose to comment on this.
Thank you, Mayor Castema. Paul Romich, District 1. I'm strongly in favor of this project. Right, I know the $1, sales cost is a sticking point for some people, but I also understand that the land isn't, entirely suitable for all use. I mean, we do have that, green light from the Department of Ecology, but you never know what that. Secrets could be unveiled as construction goes. So I understand that, that the price point at least represents the values that the city is saying, hey, we need housing, we need more retail space, and we're willing to make some sacrifices in that department to get more of that to benefit its residents, right? And I really appreciate that council has done that, right? I think this project really represents the future of what Puyallup can be, and how we get there, right? I'm not entirely sure of the nitty-gritty of all the labor elements. Those are when I'm very pro removal of restrictions for development, right? There's a lot of artificial restrictions there, but labor is never one of those things we should cut corners on. Again, hearing both sides, just seems like it might be all right. But I think there are protections the city could maybe implement into the contract that would help better guarantee that. But yeah, other than that, I think the project's great. We need the housing more than ever. The retail, we've had people come up here say, hey, yeah, we need more retail. And I think the micro retail units are an excellent idea and should be greatly beneficial to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. John Hopkins.
John Hopkins, District 1, again. I've given you written testimony. I think it's quite measured, and it addresses my concerns, which a lot of people have, primarily parking. But I started thinking about some time when I was going to AEWC conferences, and we saw a project in Redmond and how they went about it in the center of town, where they started with a landscape architect, and they brought in a lot of public opinion, like the mansion obviously would be one of them, the businesses downtown. And what they did is they generated a multi-purpose plaza type area in the middle of town, and it was a huge success. It was a benefit for the entire public. It's what the public wanted, and it was very flexible. That is the right approach, in my opinion, for doing this. And you can actually get some funding out of it, because parts of it you could still sell off to developers. Remember, developers are out to make money. There's no such thing as the Benevolent Society of Developers. The whole thing is about making money. I know that because I've done enough of that myself. But if you start with the project with landscape architects who will bring in all their people, then what you'll have is something that is city-centric and for the benefit of everyone. And actually, it solves that labor problem too, because the work that will be put out will be public and therefore covered by Davis-Bacon, and all the union guys in the room will clap their hands and say, yes.
Okay, with that, let me now open up to people who have not filled out this form. Yes, please, come forward. State your name, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Deanna Largent with the proud Chamber of Commerce. So you brought these plans to us some time ago, and quite frankly, we were thrilled because we know there is pain in change. And so, but we have to change. Puyallup is a tiny city that can be a wonderful tiny city. So I know that the kind of the rub was the dollar, but why doesn't our contractor take that dollar and do the right thing for the rest of the city? It's so pretty in the winter when it's all lit up, and everybody loves to be downtown. So cover the sidewalks, light it up, and make the city great. And I love what you're doing, so keep it up.
Thank you. Further comments? Yes, please. And just for the record, I know who you are, but for the record, state your name again, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Billy Hetherington again. After hearing the presentation, just had a couple quick comments. So not knowing the whole history of it, it sounds like we're dealing with a lot of contaminated soils down there. So As a resident of Puyallup, I'm a little concerned that last time I drove down River Road, it's nothing but car dealerships. So you're telling me that every square inch of River Road now is worth nothing, right? I get there's a lot of concessions I think that the city's giving up for not getting anything back. And I'm just concerned that, you know, all around the state when we talk about we have housing issues. We all know that, right? But we cannot solve the housing issues on the backs of labor. There has to be, you know, apprenticeship utilization. How are we going to train the next generation of workers? We're losing construction workers left and right. We're not offering opportunities for our youth to get careers that are living wage careers. They're going to allow them to be residents of Puyallup. We are a bedroom community that a lot of our people go into the inner cities and build. We need to offer more of those opportunities right here. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw some other hands. Please, go ahead. And again, state your name for the record.
Mariana Hayek out of District 2. So, I mean, after seeing the presentation, I mean, the rendering's beautiful, right? That's all great. I just wanted to come up here, you know, just kind of echoing off my brother who just spoke, and then also on behalf of my experience working within the trades. You know, it's really important that, you know, we just do our due diligence, do a little bit of fact checking, just making sure that who we invite in our town are respectable contractors, that they're not exploiting workers, that you use us as a resource to help you so that we can make sure that the folks that come and do the work here do have those labor standards. They do believe in apprenticeship utilization, that you know, they are responsible and that they haven't been known to cheat their workers. So I just ask that, you know, you do really think about this, you know, that transparency, and that you use us as a valid resource to help you identify, hey, who's coming into our town to do that work? You know, what is their history? You know, how can we help you mitigate those issues as well? You know, I mean, we love building. That's what carpenters do. That's what laborers do. So nothing gets us more excited than breaking ground on some really good and exciting projects. We just want to ensure that there is going to be something that's here that's going to protect our communities, provide safety to our communities, and making sure that we have really good, viable opportunities where we can both provide to afford to live here, stay here, work here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe I saw, don't want to draft anyone here, but I thought I saw another hand.
Oh, no, I was just pointing out that they wanted to.
Okay. Be careful what you do, you know, when you raise your hand up. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, please. And then again, your name for the record, please.
David DeGroat, District 3. Mr. Mayor and council members, regarding the 2044 draft comprehensive plan, I'd like to call your attention once again to political elements that have been inserted.
Dave, could I just intervene? We're going to address that one right after
we
this.
at the wrong?
Yes.
You're having two.
Yes, I apologize. Just hold on. And that's my fault. I didn't clarify enough. So now we're going to go back addressing, again, this is the palindrome project. Anyone else? Okay. Now I will put this to the council members if they have any questions. And would like to ask any of the members. If not, I, at this point, will leave the agenda open, and I will entertain a motion if a member so chooses. Councilmember Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions, just some comments. First of all, would like to thank labor for being here this evening. I am a product of labor. I am the niece and daughter of two Longshore Local 23 members. One who retired after 65 years on the waterfront, one who passed away 30 years in. It is because of labor that I was able to go to college and was able to make a living as a young person. I also worked in the building trades. I unfortunately am not as hardcore as to say that I built anything, but I worked in the Ironworkers District Council doing some political work under former council president Ron Pixa, who then worked his way up into as an international officer with the Ironworkers. So I do appreciate labor being here, especially after a long day. You continue to take time away from your family to be here. I so appreciate everyone that shows up to engage because it is so needed. It is so needed, regardless on what the topic is. Folks being involved in issues here at the city is really important. So 2 things. Many of you, if you are a frequent viewer of the city council meetings over the last 6 months, you know that I love to talk about downtown parking. And frankly, I would like to see at this point, because so much of the comments continue to be things that I have long been concerned about since I joined council last January, I think that it's time that we consider having a downtown parking task force, particularly related to new development that comes before us. I voted no on the updates to the downtown parking plan a few months ago. I continue to have grave concern about parking and how that impacts all of us, whether it's residential or business or visitors, et cetera. And I see that many of you do too. And then secondly, certainly I am very concerned about the past labor practices by our proposed developer. I support this project, and I've gone on record to say that. I do believe that projects like this are the future, and they are very attractive, and I think change is hard, particularly when you're someone like me who's 3 generations deep in this community, but I do think that it can be a catalyst for the future while we respect our heritage and our past and our rich history. Having said that, I need to make sure that the past is not prologue. And I am not yet certain or convinced otherwise. So if we take a vote tonight, I am inclined to vote no because I would like to do some more work and have some more conversations. But make no mistake about it, I do support this project. And it is what we need in downtown Puyallup, and I think that the time is now to do the work and to encourage development like this. But I do have some concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Are there any further comments? Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Mayor Castaba. I really appreciate Councilmember Adler's comments. I'm teacher union myself. I teach 7th grade in the current technical education, and so I strongly believe in apprenticeships and supporting our young people. I'm also in very large support of this project because I do see it as a waymaker for Puyallup. So as we figure the path forward, I do have to say that I'm absolutely behind this project to help. I'm expecting that it is open for bid, which means if a union, like our gentleman who stepped up, is a union worker, he hires a union and made the bid, it's fair game. So I do expect professionalism, of course, and I'd like to hear what we're going to do. So.
Further comments? Councilmember Whitting.
Yeah. This is a major project for Puyallup. It's obviously been on the planning table for some time. There's a lot of components that come into this. I understand the concerns about the parking issues. We've been concerned about the parking issues for some time, and for that reason we did commission a study that demonstrates that there is quite a bit of parking in town. If we can educate people where that parking is so that they can find it. There's some parking areas that are underutilized. we can do a better job with our existing parking. The other thing that I don't think has been mentioned tonight very much is the new Sounder parking garage that's available for us on weekends and evenings. So that's a lot of parking, and it's not a block away, but it's not half a mile away either from most of our downtown. So based on the parking studies that we've done, I feel like it's an area of concern, but it seems like it's been pretty well addressed, and I think we can manage that as we move forward. So I've made my peace with that particular issue. In terms of the labor situation, we definitely want to have a contractor that's takes care of its people, and we've heard some concerns about what transpired down in Oregon, but I think Mr. Gibson's done a pretty good job of explaining what happened there, and the Palindrome seem to have stepped up and made sure that the people got taken care of. So I'm not, in terms of, I think all the employees got paid, and we've had a testimony that they did a good job from one of the contractors. So that, that's a concern, but I think it's been pretty well addressed as well. This is just a critical project for downtown. It's been on the blocks for a long time. We need this project to revitalize our downtown, and as Meredith mentioned, that there are additional parking areas that we'll try and get access to for our downtown parking. Having adequate parking is vital to the vibrancy of our downtown, and I think that's been an issue that's been adequately addressed in my mind. It's not like it doesn't cause me concern, but I think this project needs to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to everyone who presented tonight and all of the information that was brought forward. Thank you to those that showed up from the Carpenters Union. We hear you. We understand where you're coming from, and your point is taken as well. There's been a lot of wisdom that's been spoken up here on the dais here this evening. All my colleagues here that have brought forth their opinion on tonight's proposal, and I'm a strong proponent of affordable housing, and there's lots of work that needs to be done in our state, not just with affordable rentals, but with actual affordable fee simple housing that needs to occur in our state. But there is a place for apartments, and with this particular project bringing 20% of affordable housing with the potential through state grants that have yet been disposed to at 25% potentially, that's, I think, a huge plus for our city to be able to bring this type of housing development to our downtown core that will not only help those that are looking for reliable housing, but to be able to support our local downtown businesses as well. I believe that the parking study that has been done and that has been spoken of this evening has tremendous value, and I think that we have done a pretty significant job at finding additional parking spaces within our downtown core. I think that we still have some work to do, and I think that we can achieve that. That said, we have the additional retail spaces that'll be going in. We have the additional food court areas that will be taking place in this development. I think those bring a tremendous asset to our downtown, and for many, many families to be able to enjoy in our downtown as well. There will be a decent amount, a generous amount of jobs that will be created, not only from this project, but from the retail spaces that will be provided. The living retail space, I've seen these firsthand in Tacoma, where they have a multi-use availability. It's genius. I love it. And I'm glad that we're able to bring that type of structure to our downtown core to allow those that are independent businesses to be able to have a storefront and essentially a loft, from what I've seen in Tacoma, that will allow the person to not only work right in our downtown, but also have a place to live in the same place. So it's a great addition to our downtown. I'm looking forward to allowing not only our unions, but non-unions to be able to apply through equality and be able to have an equal opportunity for everyone to be able to have a piece of this development. So I appreciate the presentation tonight, and I look forward to working with you all once we get down the road. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to take this from a little bit different perspective. We've been talking about parking and all the other labor things, which certainly have some merit. I too support this concept. I think there's one thing that I'm reluctantly not super excited about, is I wish there was homeownership in this, much more ratio of homeownership versus a large majority of rentals. And I'm not anti-rentals, but I'm very much pro-strong cities where people, we talked about family friendly, where people care about their community. And typically, as a rule of thumb, people that have skin in the game with equity in their home or property they own, they tend to care more about it versus people that are transient in nature and tend to move from place to place. So I'm concerned that the city, as I've mentioned before, is, utilizing this for majority of rentals. We look up and down Meridian, and there's lots of apartments up there, thousands and thousands and thousands. You look up and down here, what's that street that goes by the bowling alley there? There's just thousands of apartments down there. So we have a lot of apartments. Can we use some more? That could be a question. And there's some more apartments that I think are being proposed over here by the police station that's coming up at the Bell property. Some talk about some apartments potentially there. Yet, out of all the city, if we want high density living, I think the best way to do that for Growth Management Act is condos, where people can have high density units but have them be sold. The problem is we live in a state that has some awful liabilities. The state legislature has not done true condo reform laws to protect developers from building condos, so they get into these class action suits and they sue the developer because they get these folks getting together and they sue them. So it becomes a liability for developers to develop condos in Washington state. Now, the legislature did make some improvements a few years ago, but it's not sufficient enough for developers to take on the risk. And so if they're going to do high density, by sheer nature of the way our state legislature has not taken issue to this, they're compelled to do apartments. Now, the problem with apartments and I don't think this is coincidence, and so please allow me to go on this rant because I think it's important. I looked in some of the data, and I looked at the top 10 highest crime rates in Washington state. And it's Tacoma, Seattle, Spokane, Yakima, Burien, Lakewood, Everett, Kent, Auburn, and Bellingham. Now, within those cities, there's some interesting data that maybe is coincidental, probably not. The ratio between homeowners and renters in that city is radically different. In fact, again, from my understanding, the data I've seen in Tacoma, 46% of their people are homeowners, 54% are renters. You've switched now where there's more renters in a city, therefore the skin in the game is, I think, goes down in terms of protection for the city. Seattle, 45% are homeowners, 55% are renters. You look at Lakewood, 47% homeowners, 53% renters. Everett, 50% homeowners, 50% renters. And then just for the fun of it, see if it's coincidental, I said, what are the top lowest crimes in Washington State? Sammamish, Duval, Snoqualmie, Enumclaw, Mercer Island, Bainbridge Island, West Richland, Camino Island, Pullman, Kenmore. And guess what? There's this kind of data that says, gosh, it's no coincidence that Sammamish has home ownership of 85%, 15% renters. Duval, 83% homeowners, 17% renters. Snoqualmie, 82% homeowners, 18% renters. We're talking about a 64% spread, right? Enumclaw, 70% homeowners, 30% renters. Mercer Island, 68 homeowners, 32% renters. And every single one of those top 10 safer cities had skin in the game because the majority of their people were homeowners. They had skin in the game. Now, Puyallup is in a very dangerous ratio. If I recall right, I think we're about 55% homeowners and 45% renters. We're on the brink of shifting that. And once that shift takes place, I think the culture of our city changes because you don't have people that have investments here. Now, I'm going on this tangent only because it's a warning sign for council to do something about this. And I think that I've always said, and again, I'm going to come back to this project, so I'm not going off the rails too far. We have to take a serious look at doing what we can to incentivize high-density home ownership versus apartments that continue to come up because they're easier to build with less liability. Rather than putting incentives on developers that develop home ownership, I think we should do that. But I also think if it's possible and if it's legal, I don't know if it is, to de-incentivize people that want to build apartments. In other words, hey, you may be zoned to build them, but we're going to put some dings on there to not make it pencil out for you because we want you to kind of build home ownership in our city. So it's important. And so as I look at this project, I'm glad that there's 7 units that are homeowner. That's great. I mean, it's better than some of the other proposals that came in that had 0. So I think that's a plus. I heard that, I think tomorrow morning, Mayor, that there's going to be somewhere in Olympia some conversations about easing up the condo reform liability law. I hope that gets some traction. I guess in terms of this project, in light of what I've shared, I support the concept. I wish there was home ownership, but I can't blame it when there's liability issues for high-density condos or home ownership. I guess the question I would have, and it's not a question that I would necessarily ask, but I would petition the developer that if we go forward with this, if the condo liability laws become less restrictive, would there be an option to offer those micro-unit apartments and convert them to a for sale product that people could buy and have skin in the game and make your profit upon the sale of those? I'm not going to put that on the spot for you. I simply say, based off of the data that I've seen, it's really good to encourage home ownership. And being this is city property, I do think that we have the opportunity to set the lead on what we value, which is skin in the game and home ownership. And I'll leave you with this thought, and I hope that this is helpful, because it's a little bit of a digression, but it does come back to the core issue. When I watch It's a Wonderful Life, there's a battle going on between Pottersville and the other. And having a bunch of landlords come through and control the deal is not good for any city. We want to see people that have home ownership. And so I'm a big proponent of that. I hope that Olympia can get that right, get those condo reform deals done. I hope that the developer and other developers, should the condo reform get better in terms of less liability for these class action suits, which I think are respectfully attorneys who are looking for a quick buck on these class action rather than actually true fraud. I would hope that they would consider converting those to for sale units on those micro units and seeing people withstand the game. So that's my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I move on to Council Member Adler, I've given everyone an opportunity to speak, and I've listened to the comments of each member. Based on those, the mayor would entertain a resolution authorizing the development agreement, again, based on those comments.
Motion to approve resolution authorizing the development agreement.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we'll enter into formal discussion regarding that resolution. Councilmember Adler, sorry for the delay there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have waited to tell my housing story, but after my colleagues' comments, I feel compelled to respond, although I recognize the digression and I recognize the late hour. My parents were high school sweethearts and graduated from Puyallup High School in 1973. As you heard, my father was a longshoreman for a majority of his career. My mom worked at Boeing. I have one sister. She's 10 years older than me. She stayed at home with my sister. I came along 10 years later. Never once, when my parents were married, before I was put on this earth and after, did they own a home. They were renters. My parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. We lived in a house over in the 2nd District by DeCourcy Park. When my parents divorced, moved from that rental to a small apartment development that's still there today, Fruitland Apartments, after their divorce. My father passed away in 2008. He was never a homeowner ever in his entire life. He was 54 years old. And that him being a renter does not make him any less of a person, period, full stop. My mother, who is now 70 years old, was able to purchase her first home at the age of 58. It was a foreclosure. It was a terrific investment. It has changed her life. It did not make her any less of a person or a citizen because she was a renter. I just want to be very clear about that. I believe in housing options. Rentals are a part of that. Now, when it was time for me to move on and move out, I lived with my mom for a period of time. I do own a condo. You can see it from here. The only way I was able to purchase my first home before I turned 30 years old in 2018 was because of intergenerational wealth for which I am privileged to have, and then was able, like I said, to make my first purchase. That is not everyone's reality. I could have very well continued to be a renter, and I would still be sitting up here today. I just want to be very clear about that. The data points that my colleague has shared, data is data and data is real. But I do not think that the correlation between crime and the rate of rentals or of renters is always the most appropriate thing to point out. We have a problem in this country with housing and housing costs. Rentals help get people stable, and frankly, that's a lot of times the only choice that they have. I am a product of living in rentals my entire life until 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, I know you're on the screen. Is that a holdover? There, thank you. Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just as a minor data-driven number, it's actually 52% home ownership and 48%. So the gap is even smaller than what Councilmember for Puyallup, that Councilmember Johnson said. That said, I understand and concur with Councilmember Adler's comments regarding apartments here in our city and how that data can be judged differently. That said, I did just recently return back from Washington, D.C., where I had the opportunity to meet with Senator Maria Cantwell's team, Senator Patty Murray's team, and U.S. Representative Marilyn Strickland. And they were all very, very good meetings revolving around a whole slew of topics that we brought forward from the city to their office. And so one of which had to do with housing. And coming home on the long journey home all the way back from Washington, D.C., that is a long flight. It's been a while since I've been on a flight that long. But there were a couple instances that I took away from those meetings that I jotted down, and I came home inspired regarding housing in our state and how we can get reform done around the condo law. And I look forward to working with our council members and our mayor. They don't know it yet, but I'm going to be working with them and sharing with them all of the information that we were able to concur on that in those meetings. And so Councilmember Dean Johnson was there along with me as well. And they were very successful meetings, and we look forward to debriefing everyone regarding that. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, we have a motion and a second, and I implore you to call for a vote.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor King. I'll have one more comment from Councilmember Whitting, please.
I just want to kind of second the comments by Councilmember Adler about drawing a direct line between rentals and crime. You know, there's a lot of good people that are in rentals because they can't afford anything better, but I do subscribe to the idea that we need to generate more affordable housing and give people the chance to build wealth through home ownership. That's the way most people build their wealth, is through home ownership. And I think it's incumbent upon us to try and find ways to create more affordable housing. And I'll defer further comments about that to our discussion of the comprehensive plan, which is the vehicle to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll follow up on that. I want to make it crystal clear as well. I was no way implying that there's a problem with rentals. We have 48% of our town is rentals, so it's not like we're discriminating against rentals. I'm just saying when the ratio gets so close to where it's 50-50 or you exceed it, I think that's a dangerous precedent. So obviously there's a place for rentals. I'm just saying we need to be really cognizant to make sure as city leaders that we're looking at the long-term vision of our city. I will be supporting this bill. I simply raise this as something that we will be looking at toward the future and really molding any further city property towards those that would, again, provide high-density living that provides folks to purchase. There's lots of rentals in our city, 48%. So it's not like we're discriminating against folks that want to rent. I'm just simply saying it's probably good to have a higher ratio of homeownership for those that can, especially affordable. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of the resolution made by Deputy Mayor King, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Okay. Note there is a nay. The mayor is satisfied that there is a majority vote. And let's now move on to the motion to approve a purchase and sale agreement, which is part of the process of moving forward with the Palindrome project. I will entertain a motion. Do I hear such a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion regarding this? I will only say that such a provision of giving a very minimal amount of money for property is not at all unprecedented throughout the United States, used by large cities such as New York, Dallas, to very small cities throughout the United States. They often use it to incentivize development. In this case, we are incentivizing $40 to $50 million worth of private development. And we believe that the approximate amount that we paid for the property original, we will probably receive in retail sales, that the residents of this will go ahead and promulgate on an annual basis, not to mention the fact that we have gone 20 years without any property tax for this particular piece of property. We will also have a public square that will be maintained by Palindrome. We will have 20 parking places, again, maintained by Palindrome. A public restroom of which we spent, granted, quite a bit of money for the public restroom that we received through grants to do so. There will be a public restroom that they will build. So there are, that it is not even mentioning all the jobs and things of that sort. Again, it's not out of question that we make that kind of investment. I'll just make this note. You know, I grew up in Puyallup at a time when the downtown area was thriving. I mean, it was the place to be. And then in the late 60s and 70s, all the shopping malls took over. And downtown was a ghost town. There was no one that wanted to be downtown. In fact, that's why they turned the road into a one-way road, because they figured, why would anybody want to come down to our downtown area? We might as well use it as just a throughput for people trying to go through. And in fact, on my office wall, you will see a diagram of one of the ideas of how they were going to save the downtown area, because nobody would come downtown. And they were going to turn the entire downtown into a shopping mall. And I kid you not, close off the street to pedestrian traffic, have covered walkways, and I've got the diagram on my wall. It's official. It came from entities within the city of Puyallup trying to save the downtown. Now, we came along, the city council, and we decided we were going to change all that. All of a sudden, about 7, 8 years ago, we decided we're going to power wash. We're going to clean the streets. We're going to replace all the broken benches. We're going to revitalize our downtown. We upped the standards. Someone mentioned today that they thought that this building didn't look that attractive. The fact of the matter is there's going to be a lot of brick, stone on this building. We upped the standards so that whatever is built would be commensurate, something that people in town would like to see 50 years from now. And we went ahead and we invested all that time and effort. We've invested millions of dollars trying to bring stormwater drainage to allow for more denser development in our downtown area, with the idea that really this is the commons for Puyallup. It's where all the neighborhoods come together and we all meet. And you know, it really is working. We've got the #1 farmers market in the state of Washington. We've got the best daffodil parade you're ever going to see. We've surveyed people in Eastern Washington, and they say that the #1 place that they all, Eastern Pierce County, Sorry about that. We surveyed them in Eastern Pierce County, and they said that the number one place that they see as the meeting place is Puyallup. Not Tacoma, not any other place, but Puyallup is the place that they want to meet. This council has tried to live up to that standard. And I think we, working with Palindrome, we found a good partner. And to the individuals here from the Carpenters Union, I want you to know you do deserve very good treatment as workers. You do. You deserve to have enforceable labor standards. And if we feel as city officials, as elected officials, that that's not being done, well, we'll address it. And we are very open to your communication as such. But we feel we have partnered with someone who has made remedial steps, whatever the case may be, to rectify any past situations, and we think we can move forward in earnest. So with that, I would ask that we pass this resolution for the dollar, realizing we're going to get $40 to $50 million plus a huge amount of influx of other investment into our downtown core, something people have been waiting for years. So with that, we'll go for a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, there was one nay vote. With that, we're now going to move on to the next agenda item, and that is the comprehensive plan update. And we'll have Senior Planner Kendall Walls come forward with a presentation.
Good evening. I'm Kendall Walls with the Planning Division, and we're here tonight for a public hearing on the 2044 Comprehensive Plan update. The presentation tonight will do a brief overview of comprehensive planning in Washington State, kind of walk through the key element updates for the comprehensive plan, touch on the analysis and recommendations and next steps. So comprehensive planning in Washington State under the Growth Management Act, the city and other cities in Pierce County are required to update their comprehensive plans every 10 years. So it means we take a look at that long-term policy document, open it up, and reevaluate our goals and policies and make sure that they're consistent with any changes in state law, as well as regional planning policies and countywide planning policies. We're also required to take a look at our growth targets. We have new growth targets that we plan for the next 20 years. And we also do a land capacity analysis to show how we can accommodate that projected population and employment growth over the next 20 years. The major changes for this update were around housing, land use, and transportation. There's been significant changes in those areas in the last 10 years. So following the periodic update, we will be making updates to our development code to ensure consistency with any changes in our policies in the comprehensive plan, which in turn impact future development projects in the city. So just to touch on our growth targets, we, for the next 20 years, looking at year 2044, we're anticipating a population of around 61,500, which then breaks out to approximately 7,500 new housing units and close to 15,000 new jobs. And just to touch on kind of how the comprehensive plan works with our more regulatory aspects, the comprehensive plan is more advisory. It sets those goals and policies and implementation strategies. It's also where the future land use map resides. It's in our land use element. So that establishes our desired future land use pattern within city limits as well as the city's full urban growth area. And it also establishes those land use categories for kind of key characteristics of how we want to see land use done in the city in the future. And then that in turn informs the regulatory aspects of our zoning ordinance. So that's where all of the development standards and procedures are outlined. It also is where the zoning map comes in. The zoning map is to be consistent with our future land use map, but it is more specific. We could have multiple zones that implement one of our future land use designations. And so it determines those different zoning designations, which in turn are established in the zoning ordinance. So that establishes those regulations for building height, lot size, setbacks, just how those properties are developed today. As part of the periodic update, we had a lengthy engagement process where we did several different types of outreach. We had stakeholder interviews, we had in-person events, both at the beginning and the end of the process. We had pop-up events where we had booths at different community events to do outreach on certain topics that we were working on in the process. We also formed a community advisory group for the periodic update, which is made up of around 15 members, and they range from residents, property owners, to business owners or business representatives. And we met with them at specific major milestones in the project to receive some input on different policy changes that we were proposing. We also held a number of planning commission meetings. I think we had 20 meetings in the end, and we've also had a number of briefings with council throughout the process. So to kind of walk through the key element updates, first wanted to just, as a reminder, we have required elements and optional elements. So GMA requires that we have a land use, housing, capital facilities, utilities, and transportation elements. We also are going to be required to do a climate element. That is not a part of this periodic update. That will be required in 2029. So that'll be future work that will come before the council. And then we also have optional elements where the city has an economic development element, parks and recreation, and we also have sub-area plans for our downtown, South Hill, and River Road areas. All of our elements received some sort of an update in this process, some more than other, just depending on the need, and we'll kind of touch on those as we go through the presentation. Some overall major changes were again addressing those state requirements as well as regional and county planning policies, updating plans for new growth, our new growth targets, so population, housing, and employment. A large undertaking was working on streamlining and simplifying element text and policies throughout the comprehensive plan, which we were able to slim down the comprehensive plan as a whole, so we are proud of the changes that were made that way. Also reviewing and revising policies as needed to support environmental justice, improve health outcomes, and reduction in health disparities for marginalized communities was something that we had to look at as a whole. And then also modifying policies to prevent or mitigate residential and commercial displacement. And this was something that we more specifically looked at for the housing element as well as the 3 sub-area plans. So we're going to walk through these a little out of order so that we can talk about housing and land use together at the end. So this first element is that we're going to talk about is the natural environment element. There's also blue text on the slides, which is indicating areas that were required changes, and that'll be on the subsequent slides as well. This element received some focused work to consolidate and streamline existing goals and policies. We also worked on updating the wetland and stream data, our stream map, to reflect current conditions, which is a requirement. And then we will be doing an update to the city's critical area ordinance, which is a requirement that will come after the periodic update. So that's something that council will see this year. But that we did some work to kind of set the stage for the future work that we'll be doing in code. The community character element is not a required element, but it does contain some policy language that we needed to review to be consistent with state law. We looked at how the language informs what we're trying to accomplish from a guiding principle standpoint, as well as what we've heard from the community regarding inclusivity, housing choices, and what makes Puyallup Puyallup. So this was an element in particular that we looked at from that perspective. There were also some changes related to the language that was used in policies, and also strengthening policies around coordination with local tribes as it was required in the update process. The economic development element, again, is not a required element, but it is an existing element to our comprehensive plan, and it helps to inform how the city will address its regional center growth. We have 2 regional growth centers, one in downtown and one in South Hill. So some policy updates were made to address centers as well as workforce development, infrastructure investments, and process improvements. A large number of the goals in this element were carried forward. The next element is the transportation element, and it did receive a large update. However, many of the policy concepts were carried forward, but more reorganized, simplified, and updated to use current language and standards. Some changes that were required include a focus on multimodal transportation, so looking at all transportation users of the system, and applying a level of service standard for all modes, which is a little different than what we've had to do in the past. We also needed to look at policy for strengthening grid connectivity to improve resiliency in the system, as well as prioritizing a state of good repair, so maintaining our existing system while planning for future improvements to the system. The utilities and capital facilities elements, those are 2 separate elements in the comprehensive plan. No major policy changes are proposed for these 2 elements. Some minor policy changes were made to ensure that we can accommodate future growth. And we wanted to ensure that the element aligns with our other elements, such as our land use element. We also had some policy changes related to coordination with private utility providers and consistency with the regional planning policies. The Parks, Recreation, and Open Space element, this was really bringing the element into alignment with the city's existing Parks, Recreation, Open Space plan that was adopted in 2020. The prior version was inconsistent, so we wanted to bring those into alignment. That was a major goal for the update. So there weren't major policy changes in the work that was done. There were some minor policy updates related to language used for a couple of the policies to bring it in consistency with the rest of the comprehensive plan. The PROS plan itself will undergo its own update process, I believe, starting this year. Now to touch on our sub-area plans. So first, looking at our regional growth centers. Again, we have 2 regional growth centers, which is a unique characteristic for Puyallup for the size of our jurisdiction. We have one that's on South Hill and one in downtown. The Puget Sound Regional Council is who approves these designations, and these areas are intended to take on more growth and density within the city as well as the region. And because of our growth center status, the city is required to address growth, transportation, and mobility. So we look at things like density, serving a mix of uses, transit accessibility, market potential, which ties directly into an economic development element, as well as a framework for future growth. Where is it going to go? How are we going to achieve that? What's it going to look like? Are there other services that are needed to support that growth? So this information is within our sub-area plans for downtown and South Hill. We also had some specific changes for each of the elements. For downtown in particular, some additional updates were made for proposing to increase building heights without requiring a height bonus to help support growth downtown. Some additional policies around pedestrian-oriented development to ensure that folks can still get around, not only by vehicles, but by walking and biking and access to transit. Some additional policies that consider development types between downtown and the fairgrounds. The Downtown Regional Growth Center abuts the fairgrounds, so looking at how these uses interplay and can support each other. And as an action item of the update, we will need to update our downtown design guidelines for clear and objective standards, which is a requirement. So that is something that we'll be looking at as part of the code update after the comp plan update. For South Hill, we don't have a whole lot of changes. There's some focus areas where we could allow for some standalone multifamily residential development as opposed to it being mixed use. And we would be figuring out where those priority areas are. This was something that we've heard from the development community. And also allowing, there's no real changes to zoning and density, just more so looking at the uses and where those could occur, and also making sure that the area is development ready and allows for a gradual transition into a walkable mixed-use district that's envisioned by the plan. So ensuring that there's pedestrian connections, mixed-use development, and reuse of existing structures to help facilitate that transition. The River Road Corridor is not a regional growth center, but it is a neighborhood plan that the city has, and we part of the updates were setting it up so that we could apply for countywide center status in the future. This would allow the city to be eligible for more grant funding for the area. We've also considered some regulatory updates and incentive strategies to help facilitate development and redevelopment in this area, which we've heard a lot of interest for. But at the same time, we've added a new action item based on our conversations with council to take another look at the corridor plan and the vision and make sure that that is still relevant. And so that is something that we'll be looking at post comprehensive plan update. So now moving into housing and land use. There's 3 key housing legislation that drives a lot of the changes that were needed for housing and some in land use. The first is House Bill 1220, which has to do with housing affordability, addressing disparate impacts, emergency housing, and shelters. House Bill 1337 is the accessory dwelling unit legislation, or ADUs. The city already allows for ADUs, but we will need to make some changes in our code to be consistent with the state law changes. And then House Bill 1110, which is one that we've discussed quite a bit, which has to do with middle housing. It requires cities to consider different types of middle housing in our single-family residential areas, which I'll talk briefly about on the next slide. As you can see, there's been a lot of changes that were needed related to housing, which are shown in that blue font. A lot of them have to do with promoting affordable and attainable housing options in a few different ways. We also had to do some land capacity analysis to show that we can accommodate different housing types based on income brackets. So looking at specifically moderate, low, and extremely low income households and how we can provide housing for those areas. Previously, we would show that we could allow a certain number of units, but now we need to show how we can accommodate units affordable for each of those income brackets through zoning and other policy considerations. We also had to take a look at emergency housing and how it's permitted and where it's permitted. And then middle housing again, what types of uses are permitted in our single-family residential zones. Middle housing can range from duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, cottage-style housing. And there's 9 different types that were outlined in the legislation, and jurisdictions of our size are required to allow 6 of those different middle housing types. So that's something that was considered with the update. For the land use element itself, it did receive a pretty big overhaul in regards to its size. We did a lot of streamlining and simplifying in this one. In particular, we were able to take the goals to about half the size, and we think that it will help provide a clearer vision moving forward for both the community as well as staff that implements these policies. We also needed to update policies to accommodate our new 2044 growth targets. So that was a big piece of the updates done to the land use element. Some other changes that were made were related to allowing for a wider range of residential densities, similar to middle housing changes that we had to make. And then a lot of those changes are then reflected on the future land use map, which we will briefly go over on the next slides. So on this slide, we're showing the current map on the left side and the proposed map on the right side. So the kind of dark, bold, outlined areas are showing those parcels that we have proposed future land use map changes. There's also some areas with kind of a orangish outline, which were some private requests that we received in the process. So I'll touch on those as we move forward. Some of the changes are to meet our development targets as well as community input that we received in the process. Consistency changes that are suggested by city staff, and as well as those private requests that I mentioned. So for our regional growth centers, they already allow for a range of uses, so we're not proposing major changes in those areas. Downtown, there are some areas that had some low-density residential, and so we're proposing to change that to moderate density residential to permit a wider range of housing more consistent with a regional growth center. For South Hill, we are proposing to redesignate some limited commercial areas to mixed use, which is consistent with other South Hill designations. We also received a private request from the South Hill Business and Technology Center property owners for some mixed-use commercial along the frontage of their site on 39th, so that was also incorporated into the map changes. For mixed-use centers and corridors, Shaw Pioneer area is the one over here. We have some parcels that previously had auto-oriented commercial designation on the north side of East Pioneer that are proposed to go to mixed-use commercial to provide opportunities for a mix of uses. We also had a private request on the corner of that area that where we brought in for those changes to mixed-use commercial. These changes are consistent with the city's existing vision for that area. For the South Meridian corridor, there's some proposed changes to go from auto-oriented commercial or limited commercial to the mixed-use commercial near the Good Samaritan Hospital to help support the uses on the hospital campus. There's also some pockets along South Meridian to allow for an increase in mixed use along that corridor. To take advantage of underutilized or vacant parcels, and Pierce Transit has plans for a future high-capacity transit corridor along Meridian, so that would also help support that transit. Neighborhood commercial nodes are another area. These were existing policy in the comprehensive plan that are being implemented as part of this update. So there are some areas in the city that are changing because we are reusing the existing limited commercial designation, but some new areas where it would be applied are along Stewart Avenue and West Pioneer. These parcels primarily contain existing non-conforming businesses that are not able to really change into a different type of business. They can kind of only remain as is or can convert to residential uses. So by changing it to this neighborhood commercial use, it would allow for some potential expansion or redevelopment into a new use that might be better suited for the residential areas. So it's intended to be small-scale mixed-use nodes, so it would allow for some residential uses and lower-scale commercial. For some residential changes along West Stewart Avenue, there were some areas of existing non-conforming of denser residential uses, so looking to change those designations to more of a moderate density residential. On the west side of Fifth Street, just outside the city's regional growth center, there's a proposal to change to a moderate density residential to have more of a gradual transition from the regional growth center. South of East Pioneer, we had a private request, a private property owner request to go to a high-density residential. So that is what's been incorporated in this area, as well as a proposal for some moderate-density residential. And then lastly, on Fruitland and 31st, there is a proposal to go to moderate-density residential for a new neighborhood node.
Kendall, I have a question. Is this slide deck in the folder that each council member has been given?
I believe so. Oh, in the folder?
Yes.
No, but we can provide it.
Please do.
Yes. So to touch on the analysis and recommendations, the findings for approval of the comprehensive plan are based on compliance with the State Growth Management Act as well as those regional planning policies. So the amendments that have been made are largely to comply with those requirements as well as city priorities. We've completed there are checklists that are prepared as part of this process. We've completed those and submitted them to PSRC and Department of Commerce on December 20th. So we are awaiting response on those. So they're under review currently. The Parks and Recreation Board reviewed the the Parks Recreation Open Space element at their November 4th public hearing and unanimously recommended approval. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on December 11th and deliberated on December 18th and recommended approval in a vote of 4-1 and also included 15 amendments.
Excuse me for a second. Could you just go back to slide 32 for just a second?
Councilmember Whitting, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I missed you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just reading. I wasn't able to digest it.
I'll make sure again, Councilmember Whitting, that we all receive this slide deck. It's really fairly
and this
good.
Information is also in the staff report in more detail. So
I understand. This is a good summation. I like it.
Thank you. I'm up to speed now.
No problem.
I move a little slower than some of my colleagues.
That's just fine. So the Planning Commission recommended approval with a vote of 4-1, and they included 15 amendments, and those amendments have been incorporated into the final document that has been provided to all of council and has been posted on our website for the public. The Planning Commission wanted it to be known that they did discuss that while 4 of them did recommend approval, they wanted to acknowledge that they agreed with the work that was completed, but they didn't necessarily agree with the basis by which the work had to be completed, meaning which was for compliance with the state mandates. They had some concerns and some disagreement with some of the state mandated changes, but overall are supportive of the work that was completed. Staff did provide an alternative in the staff report, mainly because of not public comments per se, but agency comments that we received following the Planning Commission's review of the comprehensive plan. So we have 6 additional text amendments that are shown in track changes in your documents. They're found in the foundations, natural environment, housing, and transportation elements. There's a little more detail in the staff report as to what those changes are. And then again, you can find them in track changes within the elements. We find these changes to be more minor in nature, more clarifications that were made.
Councilmember Johnson.
You may have just answered that. Thank you, Mayor. The text amendments that was addressed by staff based off of agency, like state or county agency that got back with you on it. So these adjustments were based off of that. Are they truly? Because they're not listed here. They just have bullet points. Is there anything concerning that council should know about those changes that were kind of adjusted outside of the Planning Commission?
Staff doesn't find them to be concerning. We would have brought those to your attention if there was anything that we thought would be contentious. Some of them were preliminary information that we received from Department of Commerce staff on having more of a discussion in the element itself as opposed to just relying on some of our appendices. So it was just kind of adding more detail into the element. And then others were kind of more clarifications. So we found these changes to be more minor.
Okay. Is there anything specific in the housing and transportation bullet points that you could elaborate on? Give me an idea of what was mentioned by these agencies and then what your response was based off of the housing and transportation piece.
Sorry, 1 second here. So for the, did you want specific, do you want me to go through all of them or
No,
specific
just specifically housing and transportation. If there's anything, you don't need to read the whole thing, but is there kind of a summation of kind of what those two are, what they gave feedback on and how you responded to them?
So for the transportation element, it was more so recognizing the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA Transition Plan, just having a more clear description of that and referencing our existing plan that's as an appendice to the comprehensive plan. So we thought that was pretty straightforward. For housing, again, we previously had more direct information to our appendices that had more discussion, but the Department of Commerce noted that we should have, because of what GMA requires, that we need to have a little more discussion in the element itself. So there's a new section that was added on potential disparate impacts and displacement risk in Puyallup. Also, a new section to address any identified barriers to housing in the city and how we intend to address those barriers, and additional text that addresses code amendments that are anticipated to mitigate the city's capacity for emergency housing and emergency shelter needs. Again, these were things that we already had information prepared as appendices. It's more of a brief discussion and then reference to those appendices.
Yeah, I'd be curious to maybe take a look at that, specifically in the housing areas. I always get a little concerned or skeptical, or when a bureaucratic agency responds back to a kind of an elected or appointed city municipality board and gives, we take this information and we go through the process of developing it, and they kind of, the big brother, big sister looks at it and says, hey, we want it to be this way. Well, then why go through the process of elected and appointed if you're going to basically kind of, direct it this way? So I'm a little bit skeptical. I'd love to just take a look at that and see, what their comments were, and then what our response was administratively to make sure it's consistent with the Planning Commission and ultimately the council's thoughts on that. Just be curious to know that. Thank you.
Yep. And we can point you to direct information on that. Okay. The staff alternative also included 2 additional map amendments for council to consider. One is the Washington State Fair's request. This was one that Planning Commission voted to remove from the future land use map. So on the future land use map now, it only shows this portion of 6A, which is changing to low density residential that are not owned by the fair. But the remainder are kind of going to this fair designation that's the more lavender color. These properties have been owned by the fair for a number of years, is my understanding. The fair brought it to our attention and kind of saw this as an opportunity to clean up the map. The Planning Commission did have concerns about just the order of how things were happening, the fact that they were asking for the map amendment change when there are some concerns within existing zoning standards that allow for a 2,000-foot radius from the fair designation to have off-street parking to support the fair. Their concern was that by increasing that boundary, it's essentially increasing the buffer area that's allowed for that off-street parking, and also just further impacting those neighborhoods. So there was a concern about that. Staff has met with the Washington State Fair staff, and they've acknowledged that they would be willing for and supportive of code changes to modify the zoning code so that it would only really apply to the fair's main portions of the site and not those kind of outer parcels. So in essence, we've talked with the Washington State Fair folks. They have also provided written letters saying that they would be supportive of code changes and they'd be willing to work with the city on that. Our other concern by delaying this map amendment is just timing. The next time frame for a privately initiated map amendment at this point would be 2026, and so that would be processed through the year in 2026 and likely wouldn't be in effect until 2027. So we think that we can resolve these issues in the code update that's upcoming, and we could take care of those changes before the zoning actually changed for those properties. Happy to answer questions on that if that wasn't very clear. For the Business and Technology Center change, this was that other private change on South Hill. We have just a minor slight adjustment to the boundary. It's kind of hard to see, but there is an existing parcel line just north that the proposed boundary is not currently in line with. This was just an oversight on our part, so we're just proposing that that be adjusted slightly north for some more continuity and to reduce the amount of split designated parcels. So in conclusion, staff has preliminary determined that the package of amendments for the comprehensive plan, as well as the 8 alternative amendments that are proposed in the staff alternative, do comply with the required changes for state requirements as well as regional planning policies, and we are recommending approval, and more information is then outlined in the staff report. We did want to note that as we commented on, we have already addressed some of the comments that we received, but we are anticipating more comments from Department of Commerce and PSRC as they complete the review of our comprehensive plan. So there may be additional amendments that come before council as we get to the ordinance reading process. So on that note, we're here tonight for the public hearing on the comprehensive plan. We are anticipating first reading at the end of February and second reading at the end of March.
Excellent. Questions? Councilmember Whitting.
I just want to express my appreciation for the heavy lift that this represents. I know that it is a heavy lift for a small department to do all this work. So again, thank you for your efforts, and bear with me while I make suggestions or ask questions. First question is, you mentioned 2026 date for making a change later. So that's a land use change, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but land use changes are difficult, and we only really open up a window to do that once a year, if I understand it correctly.
That's correct. It's typically, we only accept applications once a year, typically in April, and then we process that through the year, and typically those amendments are then made effective the end of the year. So basically January 1 of the following year would be in effect.
Yeah, you know, I with that in mind, you know, does it make sense for us to have as much specificity in our land use designations? You know, I think about residential. You know, we've got a number, you know, low density, moderate density, high density. Would it make sense to combine all those residential categories and then do the spell out the density ratios in the zoning overlays? Seems like that would be a more efficient way and a more flexible way of dealing with the land use changes and expedite that process.
Well, land use, there's a number of land use designations beyond residential. I think when it comes to residential, it is supposed to be at a high level in the comprehensive plan. I don't know what that That would be hard, I think, for us to determine our housing numbers. If we were to combine it all as one, it would be harder for us to determine how we're able to accommodate our housing, especially, I would say, by the new income brackets. It would be harder for us to then determine how we're meeting those if kind of a large portion of the city is already designated residential. So that, I think, would make it more challenging.
But don't we have to go down to the zoning level to do that anyway?
Zoning is kind of the more regulatory that takes place after the policy work that we're doing. So it's not exactly kind of the same thing. We do have multiple zone districts that can be implemented by one land use designation. So for instance, currently we have the low density residential designation. We do have multiple zones like RS4, RS8, RS6 is in there too, and RS10 that can be implemented by that land use designation. So in that case, if it were a property that was under the LDR, low density residential land use designation, somebody could apply for more of a simple rezone process to go from RS8 to RS6, for example. So there are flexibilities as long as we have zones that can accommodate.
So what's the break between a low density residential and a moderate density residential?
For number of units?
Yeah, whatever way you think about it.
Roughly around 10 units.
So if somebody had an 8 and wanted to go to a 10 or 12, then they'd have to do that as a land use change, which could only happens once a year, right?
Likely, yes.
But if we lump those all together, we could address those individually.
Yeah, I guess the risk that my manager here is reminding me, if we were to lump all of the residential together, the risk is somebody could apply for a simple rezone to go from an RS8 to an RM core, which is our highest density family residential zone. So it would create unpredictability as to what the zone could be right next door to a single family home property.
But we do permit those things, so if it was inconsistent, we could deny the application, could we not?
Not if it was compliant with the policy.
But so somebody can apply for a different zone, different zoning, and we have to approve the different zoning? Is that what you're?
Excuse me for just interfering here, or intervening, not interfering. I guess you could say I'm interfering. Could we table this and move on to this? Because it sounds like this dialogue here would probably be more productive offline, so to speak, and then to address Councilmember Whitting. With your permission, Councilmember Whitting,
I accept that suggestion. I apologize for taking up so much time.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I know I just have people over here who are falling asleep. I've got to make sure that they can come up here and testify. Sorry about that. So, how are we doing, Kendall?
How are we doing?
Yes. Do you have more?
I am done. So unless there's more questions, we'll get out of your hair.
Well, I think you, in the last slide, kind of laid it out that a month from now is where we plan on first reading. And then a month after that would be second reading.
Correct.
So, and keep in mind that those are two opportunities for amendments. The second one being probably the biggest opportunity for amendments. But we do have to do a first reading and a second reading and pass both for this to go into effect. And having said that, all these conversations will just intensify, okay, between now and then, because there's going to be a lot of movement on this bill, as you can discern from Councilmember Whitting's comments. And he's just touching, by the way, probably where he wants to go. Having said that, we're now going to move on to the public hearing. And David DeGroot, I think you've come up here a couple times believing it was the time, now is the time to testify. So I'll ask you to come forward first.
We rejoin a program in progress.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, council members, regarding the 2044 draft comprehensive plan, I would like to call your attention once again to political elements that have been inserted that are not part of our present plan. The history addition to the foundations element is not germane to any part of the plan. Apart from a short, poorly written history of our city, it focuses primarily on the history of the Puyallup tribe and grievances over past land claims issues. It is essentially a land acknowledgement containing phrases that have legal meaning and are directed to a political purpose. Land claims are an issue to be settled between the tribe and the federal government, and not something to be litigated in our comprehensive plan. The second issue of concern is the fact that the word communities has replaced citizens as a way of calling out certain segments of the population by race as perpetual victims, regardless of any individual's personal situation. Terms such as equity, land, systemic inequalities, historically marginalized, and others are spread throughout the plan. Supporting a political point of view rather than current reality in our community. Inserting accusatory terms in a public document does nothing to bring people together. It separates and generates resentment. If anyone wonders why these issues of tribe and race have been added to our draft plan, you can look at the activities of the California legislature over the past few years. The foundation of a just democracy is that all shall be equal under the law. We cannot insist that because democracy was flawed in the past, we can correct by making it less than perfect in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next statement, Paul Romich.
Thank you, Mayor Castma. Paul Romich, District 1. I'm strongly in support of, passing the comp plan as is, provided, any feedback from other agencies doesn't come back as negative. But, this plan has seen significant community input, as Kendall started off her presentation with. The plan, I think, uses creative ways to address, modern policies like commercial nodes, right? We have existing commercial elements that are non-conforming, right? So it makes sense that there's already commercial demand there. It's better than a study. It's a real world example. Studies would make sense for hypotheticals, whereas to, hey, maybe one might not exist, where to put it. But they already exist. They're already supported by the community. Then they haven't been run out of town. So it makes sense to continue that. And overall, the land use, the density increases only makes more sense for smarter land use, right? You can have three things. There are three things, I guess, that you guys manage, right? You manage density, you manage service cuts, you manage taxes, right? And you can't
30 seconds.
You can't have services and low density and low taxes, right? There's no way to afford that long term. You already raised some taxes last year. And that's not a trend that is, sustainable. So how do you achieve it? You either have to cut services or you have to increase density. And so I think only, look at historic downtown. It's dense, it's productive, and it's the heart of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Utterback.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tom Utterback with the Washington State Fair. Also here tonight are Renee McLean and Marty Mattis, who are with the Fair Administration and have also been involved in the community group with this process. Kendall did a great job of just kind of summarizing the fair situation with the requests, both zoning and comprehensive plan, that came in about a year ago, and the fact that tonight you're just dealing with relatively small 2 areas of comprehensive plan along the 9th Avenue corridor just north of the fair, and some smaller pockets mostly to the west of the fairgrounds. I would call your attention in your staff packet to the staff report, and on page 16 and 17 is where staff overviews the staff alternative relative to the fair and discusses the Planning Commission process. I attended almost all those Planning Commission meetings, and my takeaway was there certainly was concerns about the process. What's the appropriate sequencing when you have comprehensive plan map changes, zoning map changes, and zoning text changes eventually, which are important. I think staff has done a really good job of creating the process, laying out a process for later this year where the fair zoning map and the fair code text would be done concurrently. So if there are concerns about uses or compatibility, we can amend the code before any zonings actually apply.
30 seconds.
Keep in mind, we're only dealing with the fair zone here, so there aren't implications elsewhere in the city. We can do things custom to the fair. We're in the zone. So we do appreciate staff's recommendation of reinstating and goes within this packet in your update process, and then the fair commits to continue working in good faith with the city through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Doc Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, Doc Hanson, District 1. I believe you have a copy of this report that I sent to all of you via Mayor Castelo, to the city manager and also the planning manager for your comments. So I won't dwell on these specifically. You've got that. I can't do it in 2 minutes. I want to say that the staff did a very good job in terms of providing a comprehensive plan. It's very comprehensive. Having been involved in 8 comprehensive plans, I see a lot of things that are in here that are necessary, and they've covered it very well. That being said, when you get to this level, you need to look at specific things that you might want to change and discuss. And I'll try to hit some of those. The first thing you need to do is really understand the difference between a comprehensive plan and zoning. Because, to me, there are too many classifications within this plan. Some of these could actually be removed, and I mentioned that in there. You have no buffers. There is no buffer. There shouldn't be a real buffer within the city. It should be residential. The examples that I gave within this report will point that out. Your zoning map should be much more specific.
30 seconds.
The last thing I'd want to bring up, the most important that I think, and I address this in here, is how flexible this can be. Because your future is not going to be like this. It's all been based upon trends. The trends that we've had in the past are not going to exist. And you want to take that into account in terms of examining this in terms of flexibility. How flexible is this going to be when you get your next pandemic? Because it's going to happen. What are we going to do then? It's not going to be based on trends.
Mr. Mayor, the speaker's reached 2 minutes.
Or what it exists today. Thank you.
Thank you. Doc, if you, are you sure that that has been distributed to all members? If not, I will distribute that document. I'll copy it and get it there.
No, I just brought that up.
You did it? Okay, fine. Enough said. Okay, with that, is there anyone else who has been waiting patiently? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Mayor,
Council members, first of all, thank you. This has been a long night, and your work is very much appreciated. My name is Marie Withers, and I proudly reside in District 1 in an apartment home. This city needs more multifamily housing. The idea that, as one council member said, that someone has to have skin in the game is abhorrent. As a long-term apartment renter, I have lived in my apartment for nearly 10 years. Most of my neighbors have lived there longer than I have. We are vital members of your community. We are voters. We are not transients. Homeownership is far out of reach for most Americans at this time. Unless you have that generational wealth that Councilmember Adler spoke of, your only option is often renting. Aside from that, many of us choose apartment homes as a more environmentally friendly option. I encourage members of this council to remember that every citizen of your district is important, despite the type of home they reside in. Please approve the comprehensive plan draft as written so we can move forward in helping to provide the homes that are currently needed and will be needed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments by anyone? Seeing none, we're going to now move on to the second reading of an ordinance, and we'll have Barbara Lopez please come forward. And this is an ordinance amending the Puyallup Municipal Code pertaining to sewer usage charges. We heard this, I believe, last time.
Thank you, Mayor Castma. Good evening, Council. Barbara Lopez, Finance Director. The second reading of this ordinance is to amend the code on how we compute averages for your sewer charges. So with the city, sewer charges are typically based on water consumption, but during certain time frames of the year, like spring, summer, things like irrigation, filling a swimming pool, ponds, hot tubs, etc., increase your water consumption that has nothing to do with sewer. So what this code does is it slightly modifies the time frame where we're calculating the average that we use for those higher level high water usage time frames. So essentially, this adjusts the winter bill dates. These are like your normal time frames that are billed based on actual water charges from November 16th to May 15th bills. That time frame is also used to compute the average for bills that are higher usage bills, which would be between May 16th and November 15th. So it's just a slight adjustment so that we're adding one more month where you're billed based on an average, not on your actual consumption.
Councilmember Whitting.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. I will just say before passage on this, the city actually will lose revenue, but it's a fairer system. So thank you for bringing this forward. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, nay. I believe this is roll call is warranted. City Clerk, please.
Deputy Mayor King.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilliam.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitting.
Aye.
Councilmember Adler.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Castma.
Aye. Thank you for that. Now we'll move on to resolutions. Number 7 on the agenda, 7A, resolution approving the federal Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development Grant Program application. I'm not sure what that acronym is, but it probably comes out to something. City Engineer Hans Hugger, please introduce the resolution and tell us what it's about.
Yes, Hans Hunger, City Engineer. So the background of this is we've been applying for federal grants for Shaw Road for improvements there. And from feedback from previous grant rounds where we were successful, they said one way to improve our application was to get a commitment by the City Council to that if we are successful with securing the grant, that they're committing to the 20% match. Now, this is a large grant ask that we're asking for the design of the entire Shaw Road corridor from 23rd all the way down to Pioneer. So this is essentially, if we got this grant, we'd need to a $3.6 million But that would be over time that we'd be able to develop that. So by passing this resolution, the council is committing that if we get the grant, we are committed to coming up with that grant money.
Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. Just real quickly, are you working on letters of support to accompany this application?
Yes, we've had letters of support in the past.
Okay.
And so this is really in feedback to, they wanted a little bit more showing that before we had provided a letter from our finance director, Barbara Lopez, but they wanted something that they saw from the legislative body of the city of Puyallup in support of the grant.
In addition to external letters of support?
In addition, very competitive grants.
Yep. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitting.
You talk about us being able to come up with the funds over a period of time. What kind of period of time are we talking about?
For this grant, it would be a 3-year time period for over the time period of the grant. So we'd be coming up with about $1.2 million per year. The funding sources that we could use on this that we've listed out are anything from our traditional street capital funding to the new transportation benefit district that was passed by the council. Also, Tier 3 funding could be in play there.
Thank you.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I would just say that Deputy Mayor King did crack the code that the better utilizing investment to leverage development is an acronym for BUILD. And that's very purposeful. I can't tell you how much staff time goes into creating acronyms for programs, and it's rather embarrassing how some of them come out. With that, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, nay. Okay, let's move on to the city manager's report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it very brief. Your next meeting is on February 10th. The primary item for there will be an update on the public safety building project. We'll be coming to update the council on that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can't wait for that. Okay, now let's go to the council reports. Is that it? Okay. Let's start with Councilmember Whitting.
I'm going to pass.
Okay, let's start. We'll go with Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll pass this time.
Okay, Councilmember Adler.
Thank you. Briefly, City Manager, did you say February 10th? Because actually February 11th is the Tuesday.
Sorry. Yes.
I only highlight that because I want to share with my colleagues for our meetings in February. Unfortunately, I will have to join both of those virtually. I will be back in Washington, D.C. for both of those dates, but I will be participating. And finally, I just want to thank all the folks that came out this evening, and especially those of you that have been hanging tough here into the late hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gilliam.
Thank you, Mayor Castema. I'll try to make this very brief. I just wanted to do a huge shout out for Barbara Lopez with the finance department through the city of Puyallup, because she went out of her way to be proactive to look for ways to save our residents money, and through the water and sewer charges. I'm just really grateful that we have a staff that is proactive in looking for ways to take better care of our citizens. So just wanted to do a huge shout out for her. And then I am very grateful for everybody that showed up tonight and shared their perspective and their concerns. And I also wanted to make sure and highlight that whatever the city staff brings before us, I know they do their due diligence to do the checks that need to be done in order to present and help move our city forward. So I of course, I think it's very important for as council members to question and be on top of it. But I also do have trust, and I know the integrity of our city staff. And for Palindrome, that whole project with the Cornforth Campbell lot, having served the community from that location for 12 years with a drop-in center for teens, and then seeing this project create growth for our community and more collaboration is very pleasing. And I'm also really excited to figure out the whole parking thing, making sure we have signage, making sure our citizens know it's okay to walk a block, but also taking care of our senior citizens who don't like to walk. So I am committed to help problem solve the things that need to be problem solved to help take care of our senior citizens, take care of our restaurants. We want them to be blessed. We want them to grow. And of course, we want to take care of our community and the growth that we have to manage. So thank you, Mayor Kestema.
Thank you, Councilmember Gillum. Deputy Mayor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I just want to say thank you to everyone that came out tonight to voice their concerns and opinions on the future development of the Cornforth Campbell project. I think it's going to be a tremendous asset for our city, and I look forward to seeing Palindrome do the right thing and continue forward with a fantastic project that's going to bring tremendous housing opportunities as well as retail locations throughout our downtown. And again, I mentioned earlier that last week I had the opportunity to drop into Washington, D.C. to meet with our congressional representatives, Senator Patty Murray, Senator Maria Cantwell, and Representative Marilyn Strickland. And their teams were very generous with their time and hospitality. And we talked a lot about a lot of great things that can happen here in our city. And I look forward to, again, debriefing our colleagues and hopefully being able to work hand in hand with their offices and them personally to be able to bring more opportunity to our downtown and our city as a whole. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have for today.
Thank you. Thank you all for the decisions, the work you put in, the deliberations that we had this evening, of course, specifically on the big project of the Palindrome. I respect the opinions of the members on the dais here, and I want to thank you for that. I appreciate all the comments from the audience, the patience you exhibited. We went through 3, in essence, different public comment sessions, and we went with 1 complete outage of the computer system, and we made it through all of that. And I want to thank all of you. I'm sorry to keep you so late, but I do believe that the decisions we made this evening will change the trajectory of our downtown. And again, I want to thank all the thought that went into the deliberations, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next meeting. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.